Welcome back to another episode of Sports with a Z and a T. And I think, Taylor, I could speak for both of us that this is going to be one of our most favorite episodes all year long. It is our fantasy football special. We are presented by Godzilla Media, sponsored by Mohawk Honda, Tech East Fire and Water Restoration, as you heard right before this show, Saving Face Barbershop up in Saratoga Springs, and John Stone HVAC down in Troy. We do appreciate you listening, watching, and supporting us here at Sports with a Z and a T, and we'd like to welcome our new sponsors we mentioned last week. I will again right now. We're going to give a shout out to our new sponsor, John Stone Supply in Troy. If you are looking to upgrade your heating, ventilation, air conditioning, or more in your home, John Stone Supply in Troy is your place. This month, they are offering, this is honestly just a cool word to say, I'm not going to lie. They're offering up their Fujitsu ductless splits. We are talking about an energy-saving, ultra-temp model for your home. Also this summer, they are carrying the new J-Series VRF systems. These systems will be more efficient and flexible for any setup you have in your home right now. Plus, in stock, they have for you the Westinghouse made by Fujitsu for the more basic, cost-efficient option. For more information, call them today at 518-272-5922 or go and visit them on 6th Ave in Troy, not too far away from a pretty popular barbecue restaurant that I tend to like. So if you enjoy the podcast, which I know you do because you're listening, and Godzilla Media, make sure to find out more about our partners in John Stone Supply in Troy. One more time with their number to connect. That's 518-272-5922. John Stone Supply in Troy. Call today or stop in and even say hello to the guys, Tom, James, Kevin, or Rob, and tell them you heard about John Stone from us right here at Sports with a Z and a T and Godzilla Media. We're growing. Things are getting bigger for Godzilla Media. Had a nice little local TV piece I saw from the big man this past weekend on CBS 6.
Exciting.
It's exciting stuff. And, you know, the most exciting thing to me, and I was telling Taylor off air about this, I am a psychopath, like unhealthy psychopath when it comes to fantasy football. I have books. I write down notes. I do mock drafts daily. 'Tis the season, Taylor. We have a Godzilla Media Fantasy League that is coming together, and we will be having a draft late August. That's gonna be a doozy.
Which one of us is gonna win, right?
Yeah, one of us is gonna win.
People are saying on fantasy. I know
I was about to say there are some rumblings and some claims out there that there's people from
calling us out. They're trying to
from other podcasts saying they're gonna win. I believe that I am the defending champion in God's fantasy football leagues, and I believe the other person on this show won the year prior. So I'm just saying that know who you're coming after before you stake your claim, because we're no schmucks when it comes to fantasy football. Let's get right to it. I mean, we have a lot to break down. This is going to be a fun show. We're going to go position by position. We have our list of questions, and as they become relevant with what we're talking about, we will bring up the questions that we received today. Let's go to the quarterbacks right off the rip. We'll start easy with the quarterback position, and the biggest controversy really through all of fantasy football, and to me, my honest opinion is if you draft a quarterback before the 5th round, you're an amateur. That's kind of been my thing. I've never drafted a quarterback. I've never fallen in love with the Patrick Mahomes, Michael Vick when he was the guy. I never drafted Lamar Jackson when he was, the number 1 overall quarterback 2 years ago. Let's go through these rankings, and I will base these rankings off ESPN because that is where our draft will be from, is going to be off ESPN, I assume, in those rankings. So that's where I pulled these rankings from. I'm going to go top 5 first because those are considered really the elite quarterbacks. And you can really get by without elite quarterbacks in fantasy football, but it's a discussion. People do it every year, so we have to talk about it. Top 5 from 1 through 5 is Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, and Lamar Jackson. Four of those 5 I would be thrilled with having as my QB1. Is it going to happen? Probably not, just simply because I don't value the quarterback position that much. Let's start with it. I mean, there's not much to say when it comes to Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, he's in a class of his own.
He is Patrick Mahomes. If not for resting week 17 last year, he was on pace to set the all-time record for quarterback points. So, and he probably will do it this year because you have that extra game.
If there's anyone in the world I would reach for, because the thing with the quarterbacks is that just statistically, the difference between like the number 1 quarterback and the number 15 quarterback usually isn't that much. And that's why you prioritize, say the running back position, because if you don't get one of the top, 10 to 15 running back, especially those top 10, like top 8 guys, I'd say that's where it starts to maybe fall off. You don't get one of those guys, then you might be in trouble, or at least if you don't get someone who ends up finishing there, you might be in trouble. And so, once you get down to once you get all the starting running backs off the table, it's like at that point it gets rough if you're sitting there and you don't have one of those top guys. So yeah, in terms of quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes is the only one that I could justifiably say, like, if you take him in the 3rd round, if you had a strong first 2 rounds and you want to get frisky and take him, you're never going to have to worry about the quarterback position if you take Patrick Mahomes. Like, he's a start and forget no matter what, unless he gets hurt, obviously. But that's,
Josh Allen's an interesting topic because I think to any extent there is regression coming for Josh Allen simply because he had that good of a year. That's not a knock on Josh Allen. It's just going to be very hard to repeat what he did last year. Mm-hmm. He was last season's top scoring fantasy quarterback thanks to that breakout year that I mentioned. 25 years old. He continued to deliver with his legs, which is huge in fantasy football. You got to remember that it's not just passing stats, it's using their legs, and that's where you see these top 5. They're all, to some degree, rushing quarterbacks. Now, you talk about Josh Allen. I think he's definitely QB2. This is where I start to differ right off the rip. Kyler Murray. Look, Kyler has performed as advertised since being drafted, right? I mean, top 10 in pass attempts, top 3 in rushing attempts. The offense is catered to use Kyler Murray in a lot of ways. You have DeAndre Hopkins. You have some question marks in the backfield. Now you're assuming that Chase Edmonds is really going to be the guy. You have James Conner as a backup, but you're assuming that DeAndre Hopkins is once again going to be his go-to. I struggle to see that offense progress to a point where I'm taking him over a Lamar Jackson. I think now the tape is out on Lamar. However, he is the premier rushing quarterback in the NFL, and his floor is literally 10 to 15 points a week, simply because he's going to get you close to 100 yards each and every week on the ground. Lamar Jackson is their running back. Oh, and by the way, he could throw. I'd almost consider Lamar Jackson the number 3 quarterback here.
Yeah, you could even easily argue him at 2, depending on how much you think Josh Allen is actually going to regress. But anyone who can get those rushing touchdowns is, you get more points. You get more points in most leagues, in standard leagues, in standard ESPN leagues. They have that you get 6 points, I believe, for a rushing touchdown as opposed to 4, I think, for a passing touchdown. So anyone who can run the ball and get touchdowns that way is going to be more valuable. Whether, Jackson is good and at least at running the ball, and they don't have a standout running back in the backfield. Not that Kyler Murray really does either. David Johnson's still there, I believe, right? And he's, he hasn't been as good as he was. But yeah, I could see Lamar Jackson finishing as high as second. But definitely he could be third. And as far as I know, Kyler Murray has said that he's going to try to rush less, not more. He's going to try to be more of a pocket passer.
Well, I'll start with Kyler. He's going to see that passing volume in a Cardinal scheme that led the NFL in pace of play each of the past 2 years. So it's telling. It's not Chip Kelly-like, but it is in a way that they're going to try to get as many plays in as possible. And they are going to use Kyler Murray in almost every asset that he has. He has that elite rushing ability and locks him in as the strong fantasy QB1 either way. When it comes to Lamar and your point, the emphasis is going to be for him to throw the ball more. And that was clear based on the Ravens offseason, drafting Rashad Bateman, who I like, by the way. We'll get to that. Tylan Wallace, Sammy Watkins was brought in. They already have Hollywood Brown, Mark Andrews, who's a top tight end. Get to him. J.K. Dobbins is another darling fantasy name that we'll get to as well. Lamar should be valued as a bottom line mid-range quarterback with the upside to be the top fantasy quarterback this year. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on the top 5 because there's just so many more names that people want to hear more about.
They don't have David Johnson anymore. I was wrong. The Chase Edmonds is the Cardinals running back. So again, I mean, I just don't think that Kyler's going to be rushing quite as much as Lamar is. So if that's what you're valuing, I definitely put Lamar over him.
And then Dak Prescott, I'm sorry, I get the logic. Look, you have Amari Cooper, you have CeeDee Lamb, you have Michael Gallup, you have Zeke in the backfield, you have a weakening offensive line. Now the offense is going to have to put up points. I get it because the defense is so bad. However, Dak is coming off a horrific injury. Now, has that been as much of a problem so far? No. But now he has a shoulder strain. And it has been at least relayed to us that it's more of a baseball injury than it is a football injury. I don't care either way you slice it. You're at a shoulder injury, a shoulder strain, shoulder fatigue, however you want to put it, is not something I want to hear in my fantasy quarterback in the second week of August. That's not anything. So I'm going to let somebody else take Dak. And I'll be okay with being wrong on Dak and letting somebody else flourish with him because I know there's value elsewhere. And we'll go right off the rip. You have Aaron Rodgers. His average draft round is 6. Russell Wilson is 7 overall. Justin Herbert, 8. Brady, 9. Now it gets interesting. When you start hitting 10. You have Jalen Hurts at 10, which...
That's surprising to me.
We'll get to there. We'll get to that in a second. I understand the logic. Do I agree with it? No. And as I'm sitting here in my Devontae Smith Eagles jersey, no, I don't agree with Jalen Hurts being the number 10 quarterback out there. Tannehill at 11, Joe Burrow at 12, Matthew Stafford at 13, and Taylor, I don't know if you have this list in front of you.
I think I have that list, but we had to switch. Do you have in standard, or are you looking at the PPR?
It doesn't matter for quarterbacks. No, it doesn't matter for quarterbacks. I'm going off PPR.
The one I had has Matthew Stafford 12, and
you are mental. You are mental. You bring up a good point. You are mental if you are in a league that's non-half PPR. You are absolutely mental if you are in a league that doesn't value receptions.
But
but a league that doesn't value non-PPR, you're sick. You are a sick, twisted individual.
You're sick. It's not as fun. It's more fun
not.
when you add
it's
it
not.
in.
It's not.
Like
Matt Ryan is
much better.
Matt Ryan's 14. Trevor Lawrence is 15. Ben Roethlisberger 16. Danny Dimes is 17. Justin Fields is 18, which is interesting, assuming that that's assuming he starts. Ryan Fitzpatrick is 19 and Baker is 20. So we'll go 10 through 20 now, Taylor, and that ranges from Jalen Hurts all the way to Baker Mayfield. Let's start with Jalen Hurts. And we do have a question involving Jalen Hurts, but it's with quarterbacks that are lower on the list. So I'm going to save the question for now. Look, he's going to be the Eagle starter. There's no competition. There's no denying that he needs to work on his efficiency. He can use his legs. He's going to be a focal point of a offense. Now cater to him. You have weapons on the offense. Miles Sanders, Boston Scott in the backfield. You have when healthy offensive line, a top 5 offensive line in football. You have 2 star tight ends at the moment, Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. We'll see if Ertz stays. And then you have Devontae Smith, Jalen Reagor, and Travis Fulgham, Greg Ward at wide receiver. I need to see it to believe it. I would be willing to take Jalen Hurts as my backup, but not as my starter. I think that's where Jalen Hurts' value is. And if Jalen Hurts turns out to be your quarterback one by week 6, whoever you drafted as your starter, you could probably get good value for those. So say you go and get, a Rodgers or a Wilson, and Jalen Hurts slips, or you don't trust Rodgers or you don't trust Wilson to be as consistent as they have been. Jalen Hurts is a guy to keep an eye on to kind of fill that backup quarterback spot. Now, I'm typically one of those guys that once I draft a quarterback 6th, 7th round, I'm drafting a quarterback in like the 14th. Like I don't care who my backup quarterback is for 1 week, but that's the type of player you're looking at in Jalen Hurts. Now, his ceiling is extremely high. I mean, his ceiling is a Kyler Murray high. Similar style of play. The offense is going to be catered similarly. Does he have the talent? That's going to be the ticket. He needs to overcome that shaky start that he had last year when he stepped in. He has a good line, elite rushing, high weekly floor with his legs.
Mm-hmm. And I think he's a bit too high for me right here, but we're getting into, so we're talking about the top 10 through 12 right now, or like the 10 through 15 range. These
are the people that don't value the quarterback. This is where they're looking.
Exactly. But also it's like, this is like the end of where everyone has already picked their quarterback, assuming that all these other quarterbacks are off the board. Obviously, before you get down to where Jalen Hurts is available, then all the other teams have like their elite guy. I think you could argue everyone except, you talked briefly about Dak Prescott, and I would not want to draft him just because you don't want to go into a season with an injury already. But I wouldn't blame you if you did, because he might end up being one of the top. If he's healthy, he's going to be one of the top quarterbacks.
Of course, that offense has to put up points.
Yeah, through the way that they are. So if you're getting down to it where you're at 10, 11, 12, and you're like one of the last teams to get your starting quarterback, I wouldn't blame you for taking a flyer on Hurts, but I think I'm with you in that I would rather have him as my backup than my starter. And I look like I think it was 1 for you down. Who was at 11 for you?
Tannehill.
Stafford? Tannehill? All right, yeah. Well, I look at, what is it, 13? It was Stafford, right?
Correct. Yep. Correct.
That's the guy I'm looking at, and I don't know why he's that low, because I would put Stafford in the top 10. He's on a brand new offense, a pass. Well, they like to run and pass, but they're a high volume offense, and they were maybe crippled a little bit with Jared Goff because it turned out he wasn't quite as good. But everyone's telling me that Matthew Stafford is one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the league, and now he has guys like Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods and a play caller who has been known to put up volume offenses. So I really think that he's a guy you can really get at value, and he might end up being a top 5 to 6 quarterback at finish. You
bring up Matthew Stafford, and this is a guy that last year was horrible, mainly because Detroit's just horrible, right? And they were a dumpster fire under Matt Patricia in his final year. But this is a guy in Stafford that's finished as a top 9 fantasy quarterback 6 times in the past 10 years. I mean, this is a guy that always is under the radar, always performances. Now, does he use his legs? No, he's not that type of quarterback. But in an offense now that has Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Henderson at running back, Higbee at tight end, a good offensive line,
and Sean McVay calling the plays.
You could do worse than having Matthew Stafford as your QB1. And this was a guy that I've had on all my radars. Now ESPN lists him as a good QB2 option. You could do worse than Matthew Stafford as your QB1. And imagine, and we'll talk about these other positions coming up, obviously, but drafting a guy like Stafford or a Burrow or a Tannehill in the later rounds, say 8 through 10, you could take those earlier picks and get a whole lot of depth, good value for the rest of your roster.
Yeah, and I'd even take Stafford over, I look at Tom Brady. And, Brady's amazing, but
had Brady last year.
He's getting up there, and he has some games are good. Some games he puts up a little bit of a stinker, and he relies on the defense to pull him through. I mean, he's not, I don't think, as high a volume guy as he maybe used to be. And so when I look at that offense and that excitement around Matthew Stafford in LA, and I think he's a value you can get. And I think that you could definitely do worse for a QB1. I think I would feel comfortable taking him as my QB1.
All right, so let's do well, we did through 20. Now, I'll go through 25 because of most leagues are 12 team. So that will be 12 times 2, 24. So we'll go through 25. 20 through 25 is Baker Mayfield at 20. Deshaun, now this is where one of our questions comes in. DeShaun Watson's at 21. We'll get to Deshaun here in a second. Kirk Cousins is 22. Tua is 23. Carson is 24, which might change now.
Honestly, he could be lower.
Jameis is at 20.
He's not even on my list. Like,
and
I don't know why my list is different than yours, but Carson's not even on my list.
It might be because
goes up to 25.
It might be because that specific list removed him because of the injury, which is very possible. So I'm going to take Carson out of this and go one more down after Jameis, and that would be Derek Carr in Vegas. So Deshaun Watson. And we're just going to go into the question right now. We had a question when it comes to, and this is, where you're looking down for value. This is later on in the draft. We had a question, draft in a specific order. Jalen Hurts, Deshaun Watson, and in parentheses, if you will, if he even plays, and Justin Fields. Now, these are all guys. There's a lot of excitement around Justin Fields, but there's questions around when and if he will start. Now, I would be stunned by week 6 if Fields is not the starter over Andy Dalton and or Nick Foles. I just don't simply see where the Bears would gain anything having Fields sit more, especially how good he has been from everything I've heard in camp so far. Now, I get it. It's camp. He's not getting tackled. He's not getting rushed. He's not getting touched. So I get it. However, this is a guy that if I'm looking for a backup quarterback and my starter is somebody consistent in the top 10 that we mentioned, Justin Fields is a guy that, hell yeah, I would take a flyer in the 13th, 14th round and stash him on my bench. Justin Fields has the potential to be a top 10 quarterback fantasy-wise down the stretch. Not that he will be, but he has that potential, and that's something that intrigues me, especially when it comes to the later rounds and you're looking to fill out your depth and maybe somebody to hold on to, not for the immediate, but for, say, the fantasy football playoffs. He's a good insurance policy that could pay massive dividends for you.
For sure. I mean, rookie quarterbacks are kind of an anomaly sometimes, because even like they can come in and some tight ends or wide receivers, they're rookies. They take a year where they just kind of have to adjust. Some rookie quarterbacks, not that they even play well for the team, so to speak. Like the team might not win with them, but they can put up numbers. I'm going back to, like a Pat Mahomes. Obviously he's an outlier because he's so good, but like other people have come in and they just put up numbers, like Lamar when he was first coming out, and and then he went crazy. And it's like, people don't know what they're capable of. So it's hard to game plan for someone when you don't technically know how they're going to play in the NFL. So that can go two ways, where if they play poorly, then you're shit out of luck. That's why, I mean, I would hope no one's taking Fields as their QB1 unless you waited until the last round and you're just like, you drafted no quarterback strategy, which I know people who do that, who take a no quarterback strategy. Like they literally won't. I know one guy in particular, I think he listens to the podcast. He might be listening right now, but he will like not take a quarterback until literally the last round. And I'm like, always, every time he comes up, I'm just like, is this the round? Is he going to cave? Nope. He'll go all the way to the end. But yeah, if once he starts, he could definitely come out guns a-blazing, especially if he's using his legs and getting, those yard touchdown on the ground touchdowns. And people don't know how to game plan for him at first. I mean, Allen Robinson is a good guy. I like Darnell Mooney. I'm sure we'll get to him eventually. in terms of talking about wide receivers and sleepers and flyers we
Sure.
like. But yeah, so he's got some weapons if he ends up starting, which I assume he will, just like you, at least midway through, even earlier, maybe, depending on how their season goes. He's a guy I would take late and stash him on my bench.
And keep in mind, the Bears have a very friendly division when it comes to defenses, and that's when that's kind of what you look at outside of the fact. And I'll bring up the Bears real quick and their schedule. It's easy. I mean, think about playing the Lions twice. The Packers have never been good defensively. The Vikings aren't what they used to be. So this is a team, and I have their schedule now. So assume Fields starts week 5, just for shits and giggles. Vegas, Green Bay, now Tampa, that would be a disaster.
San Francisco could be a disaster too.
San Francisco could be rough. But then Pittsburgh, whose defense really, you know what? Pittsburgh's defense is good, but not great.
I mean, you're going to have TJ Watt coming at you. So
Baltimore's defense is good. Mm-hmm. But then Detroit, Arizona, Green Bay, Minnesota, Seattle, Giants, Vikings down the home stretch when it matters for fantasy football.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all winnable games for me. When I'm looking at Arizona, Green Bay is not winnable, but they'll be throwing the football a lot. Minnesota, Seattle, the Giants, Minnesota again. None of those defenses stick out to me. So, like I said, if you're looking for a guy with value, Justin Fields might be it. Now, we had a question. The question was, draft them in order: Jalen Hurts, DeShaun Watson, and Justin Fields. Let's touch on Watson real quick, because I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there that are wondering, do I even consider DeShaun Watson? He's been on the practice field for the Texans. He has those pending allegations against him. I expect, this is just my gut, and I've flirted around with this in a couple mock drafts, DeShaun Watson always falls because most people know where this is going. I'm almost willing to bet that DeShaun Watson will be on a league mandated suspension, based on the fact facing allegations of sexual assault, inappropriate behavior, and 22 pending lawsuits. He's not going to be your starter. Let me be clear. This is a guy that's finished as a top 5 fantasy quarterback each of the past 3 years. This is a guy that is a stud. This is a guy that would be gone before the 5th round in any draft outside of this year. He's dual threat, has ranked in the top 6 among quarterbacks in rushing yards and passing touchdowns. This is a risky investment, though. Now, would I take him in the 14th, 15th round? And if I have to drop him, I'll drop him. Sure, absolutely. But you have to be the one to value that spot. And if you're going to waste a spot on a guy that likely won't see the field this year, and that's what you're gambling with when it comes to Deshaun Watson this season.
Yeah, definitely. If you're gonna take him, let him fall and take him. If
somebody's going to take them in the 14th round or sooner, let them.
That's what I mean. Is like, if you get down to a point also where like you're sitting there and it's like round 15 or 14 or 15, and there's no one else that you even like, but he's still sitting there, then maybe, depending on who you have if you don't trust your starting quarterback, you don't have your starting quarterback yet. I mean, sure, go for it, but like, probably not going to be on my team. I'll tell you that much. I'm letting that fall where it may, and someone else can deal with that headache. I want a quarterback who's reliable.
And that goes to the other one. We've already touched on Jalen Hurts, but I think when you're talking about these 3, I would draft Jalen in this order: Jalen Hurts, Justin Fields, and Deshaun Watson. My reasoning is Jalen Hurts is going to start every game, barring an injury. He has the weapons on offense, and he has the legs to make him a safe play each and every week, simply because you're going to get those rushing yards out of him. He's a safe play, a solid QB2. Justin Fields is more of an investment to see if he will be the starter by midseason. I mean, we're just assuming that the Bears will. We don't know how their thinking is, but on recent seasons, there isn't really much as a such thing as a red shirt season for a quarterback anymore. So I would be stunned to see Fields not in there by week 6. Very friendly second half schedule for him. And then Deshaun Watson is just a hope and a prayer. Now, if you draft him and he somehow sees the field and gets traded and somebody acquires him, all of a sudden you have a top 5 fantasy quarterback. So the risk reward is there. But however, I'm not seeing a way in 2021, Deshaun Watson sees the field. So that is my logic for Hurts, Fields, Deshaun Watson in that order.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I mean, Hurts, you can definitely have, even if he's your quarterback, your starting quarterback, I wouldn't call you crazy as long as you've got value other places. If you're stacked at running back and you've got solid wide receivers and you want to go with Jalen Hurts and see how he does, that's fine. And more power to you. You might, I mean, if that connection to Devontae Smith is true, then, you could be looking at a top 10 finish at quarterback for Jalen Hurts easily. And then obviously I think Fields, has the potential to be a breakout guy, but I agree with you that he won't be starting right away and it may take a couple weeks. I don't know how many weeks, because a lot of times, they go into a season and it's, I don't know when he's going to start. And by week like 3, they're in. So he could be starting a lot sooner than we think, but still he is going to be unproven. So I mean, he's got to be the backup guy that you stash on your bench. And Watson, I personally wouldn't take him, but if you did, and like you said, he somehow plays, gets traded, even if he goes to the Eagles or something crazy,
oh man,
you already you have a top 5 quarterback at worst top 10. So yeah.
All right. So how we're going to close out each position: stud, dud, and breakout. We're going to list a stud for each, a dud for each, and a breakout for each. I'll start off with you, Taylor. Who is going to be your stud quarterback for the 2021 season when it comes to the quarterback position?
All right. Well, obviously, like the top guys, I'm not going to talk about because, I mean, we all know
let's keep this out of the top 5 for this position. Yeah, the obvious.
So honestly, I think I'm going to go with the guy that I talked about earlier, not to be boring or anything, but I think Matthew Stafford is going to be a stud. I think he's going to be a guy without the rushing touchdowns. You don't need rushing touchdowns to be a top quarterback. It helps, but you don't need it. And so I think he could easily finish in the top 5. I think that offense is going to be absolutely explosive. I think it's going to be reminiscent of Jared Goff's first year, but better, because I think Stafford throws a better deep ball than he does all day long. I just think Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp are going to eat. So my stud is Matthew Stafford.
I agree with you. I'm going to go with Justin Herbert. We have not talked Justin Herbert on the show, and I love Justin Herbert going into this season. Absolutely love Justin Herbert. I had him last year, and I think he's only going to be better this year. He had 36 touchdowns to 10 interceptions in 15 games last year. He was a top 10 fantasy quarterback in 60% of his starts. That only trailed Rodgers and Kyler at the position last year. Herbert's numbers certainly benefited from a friendly offense with a lot of weapons, but new offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi has the tendency to be very heavy on the pass. And the running back, and we'll talk about running backs in a bit, when it comes to Austin Eckler, he is more of a pass-friendly running back. He's not going to be one of those guys. He's not a Melvin Gordon where he's going to bulldoze you over. This is going to be a very heavy pass-oriented offense. Now, you lost Hunter Henry. I get it. But you still have 2 beasts of Keenan Allen, Mike Williams on the outside. He's only 23 years old. I think even though he has an underwhelming supporting cast outside the 2 that I mentioned, along with Eckler, this is just a guy that has really stable floor as a solid QB1 with a chance to have a Josh Allen type season like we saw from Allen last year. I love this kid through and through, and I think he's going to be a stud.
Yeah. I mean, I got nothing bad to say about Justin Herbert. I think he's a guy I would love to have on my fantasy team.
All right, let's go with the dud. Let's start off with your dud of the quarterback position for 2021.
My dud. Ooh, I got to think about this for a second. There's a lot of guys that I don't think will perform as well as maybe they're. I mean, when I look at this list, I see like Ben Roethlisberger. He's at 16. I wouldn't want him on my team. I think he's getting up there with age, and I just don't think that Pittsburgh offense is going to be so explosive. At least not in the air attack. I think on the ground game, Nachi Harris will get to the running backs at some point, but I think that's where you're going to find your value at Pittsburgh. So I'd fade Ben Roethlisberger. I think he's going to be the dud this year.
I am going to throw out Tua Tagovailoa. And the reason I say that, yes, he's the clear-cut starter in Miami. Yes, they have a friendly offense. Myles Gaskin, a running back. They brought in Waddle. They have Devontae Parker still. They brought in Will Fuller as well. They have Gesicki at tight end, a good offensive line. I just don't like Tua. I don't think he has it as an NFL quarterback. Efficiency needs to improve. He ended with 14 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, was QB 15 in fantasy points during 7 full games last year as a rookie. He adds some value with his legs, has that improved supporting cast like I mentioned, but he's not a sure thing. He's well positioned for a second year improvement, but it's not more so what I think Tua could be this year. It's where he's going. He is ranked, like I said, he is 23rd, which is reasonable here. However, you're seeing him go 8th, 9th round as a quarterback in some mock drafts, and I'm sorry, I just don't see it. He's not a starter. Some people view him as a starter, and for me, he's nothing more than a late round flyer on draft day.
Yeah, I think I had him on my team last year, and I don't think he really started at all for my team. And if he did, he wasn't very effective. So yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that. I don't think that he can't be a starter, but I'd like to see a little more from him before I go and take a high pick.
Could you do worse as your QB2? No, but I don't feel good about my chances if I have to rely on him week in and week out, considering that offense typically in the past, they relied, especially last year, on that defense and the running game to get them where they go. I mean, were they competitive last year? Sure, they were a surprise team, but I think that was more in spite of Tua and because of Ryan Fitzpatrick more than anything. All right, let's go to the breakout for your quarterback in 2021.
So I got to clarify what you mean by breakout exactly. Like a guy who's just coming up that you think is going to do well, or did poorly last year and you think he'll do better?
It could be either. It could be somebody that took a Josh Allen leap that nobody really saw coming, or it could be a rookie that you think is going to have immediate impact. You could take it either way you want. I don't have rules on this show. Just don't talk stupid, because I know where you're going with this.
Do you?
Maybe.
I don't think you do. I think I'm going to come out of left field with this one.
Okay. All right. Go for it.
So this guy isn't new. Not really. But I think he's going to do well because he always kind of does. And I think I like the weapons around him. I'm going to go Ryan Fitzpatrick for the Washington football team. I think he's not okay. He's a high volume quarterback. He likes throwing it. I love Terry McLaurin. He's one of my favorite wide receivers out there. And he's got Antonio Gibson in the backfield to take some heat off. I think he's going to put up some crazy games with some crazy numbers. Whether they win or not, I don't know. But I think Ryan Fitzpatrick, if you have him as your QB1, I think he's going to be workable as your starter.
I think he has a significantly defined ceiling. Now, so you know what I mean? Like, he's not going to win you weeks, but he's not going to lose you weeks. So I guess that's a reasonable break. I don't know. I feel like I'd rather, if I'm drafting Ryan Fitzpatrick, I'm kind of looking at myself and viewing it as a panic. Not that you're going to be wrong. I'm not saying that, but just me personally, like I would view it as like a panic pick. Like I didn't know who else to take, so I took Ryan Fitzpatrick.
If you're in like round 8 and you pick him, yeah, that might be a panic pick. But if your plan going in is you're gonna pick Fitzpatrick and he's going to be the guy you trust more or less week in, week out, maybe you take a Justin Fields on the back end just to shore yourself up. Maybe you put him in if he starts getting hotter than Fitzpatrick. But if your team is solid around him and you put Ryan Fitzpatrick in there, I don't think it's going to be bad for you. I will keep harping on it. Terry McLaurin is one of my favorite guys. And I mean, honestly, I might have to talk about him in our wide receiver section, so I might have to shut up right now.
My breakout, I don't know if this is considered cheating based on where he is rankings wise, but I don't think, maybe this is more just me. Not enough people are talking. Yeah, Patrick Mahomes is my breakout for 2021. No, Joe Burrow. And the reason I say Burrow is, look, he's coming off the torn ACL. Yes, he's ranked 12th in the rankings. However, I think a lot of people are scared off because of the ACL injury that he had last year, and not a lot of people realize what they did on offense. Volume is king, and that's not usually often applied to quarterbacks, but it should probably fit the bill when you're talking about Joe Burrow. And especially last season, prior to week 11, he ranked first among quarterbacks in snaps and dropbacks, second in pass attempts, 9th in passing yards, and 14th in fantasy points. Does he need to work on his efficiency? Yes, it was solid, though. And he has, in my opinion, one of the best supporting casts a fantasy football owner could ask for when it comes to your quarterback. T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, you brought in Jamar Chase, you have Joe Mixon at running back. He is a very good quarterback, too, that has a chance to have. Now, is he as mobile as a Josh Allen? No. But is he going to use his legs? Yeah, and he showed that he will. And I don't think he's going to be scared because of this ACL injury. Mm-hmm. You're not going to see him much in preseason, but he's going to be ready to rock in week 1. Joe Burrow, would I feel good with him being like, if I take a Joe Burrow quarterback, I'm quickly looking at like a guy like Jalen Hurts. I'm quickly looking at a guy like Trevor Lawrence, a Justin Fields, a Baker Mayfield, somebody that in a pinch I can trust because I'm not so sure it's going to, hit. But Joe Burrow has a safe floor, and I think he's lined up for a pretty good breakout year.
Yeah, I can definitely see it, especially with Jamar Chase. They have that old connection.
Such a good connection.
That's what I mean. And like, if that gets unleashed, I mean, the sky's the limit for Burrow there. We know he's got like the accuracy in the arm to do it. Whether the offensive line can hold up long enough for him to actually throw the ball and not shatter his knees again, I don't know. That's questionable. But I think, yeah, I agree with you. He could definitely be the breakout star. I would feel okay with him being my starter. Don't know if I would actually draft him to be my starter, though. If I had to and he was there, then I'll settle for him. I'll say that.
So let's go to running back. Our quarterback position is done, and we go
after 45 minutes.
After 45 minutes, so you can tell how long of an episode this is. Hey, this is a fantasy football special. You knew what you're getting yourself into. We appreciate you hopping along. Let's go to the running backs because look, this is where you start your this is where you start off your roster more or less. I mean, this is what the first round mostly consists of, and we'll go through the top 10 rankings first. McCaffrey at 1, Dalvin Cook at 2, Alvin Kamara at 3, Saquon Barkley at 4, Derrick Henry is 5, Zeke is 6, Jonathan Taylor is 7, Austin Eckler is 8, Aaron Jones is 9, Nick Chubb is 10. We'll move on after we get through these 10 guys. I'll start off with McCaffrey. McCaffrey is, in my opinion, the clear-cut number 1 fantasy player of the 2021 season. He should be the number 1 overall pick in any draft that you are in. If he's not going past 2, and I don't know if the guy at 1 really knows what he's doing, because McCaffrey is going to be a hog. He's coming off a really injury-riddled season last year, but Joe Brady's running back friendly offense, along with Matt Rule, he's a candidate, in my opinion, Taylor, for 400 touches through the air and on the ground, and is locked in as the top asset in fantasy football.
Yeah, no questions asked about it. I mean, as long as he's healthy, he will be the number 1 running back, or at least competing for it. And I would feel no qualms about taking him at number 1, unless you're worried about the injuries, which, I mean, I personally was slighted by Christian McCaffrey last year.
I'm in a league this year. I was granted the number 1 overall pick. I'm not even thinking twice. All
right. I probably wouldn't either. I mean, I'd probably still take him. Just in our league with Gauze last year, I think I was on my way to really competing for the win there if I had my number 1 pick.
Who won last year, Taylor? Who won last year?
Who didn't have their number 1 pick? Me. I didn't have my number 1 pick. I didn't have Christian McCaffrey all year. He played like 4 games, and you know what? Those 4 games were amazing. Those 4 games that he played, it was like 25. He averaged like 25 points per game.
Well, that's to the point where that's to the point where if he's going to be a stud. Dalvin Cook. Look, there's not much to be said about Dalvin Cook. He is what he is. He's going to be a centric piece of a run-heavy offense out in Minnesota. He is probably a pretty solid consensus number 2 running back. This is where it gets interesting, because these are 3 running backs that I've seen in different orders, and let's do this. Let's take Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, and Derrick Henry at 3, 4, and 5, and personally rank them, because I think that's where the conversation is. There's a clear top 2. However, there is a top 3 there, the next 3, that could go either way. And we also had a question about where to take Saquon Barkley because of the obvious injury concern around him and the Giants being conservative with his workload moving forward, and the fact that he just came off the PUP list yesterday, yesterday being Monday as we were recording on Tuesday. This is a guy that, look, he is a top 5 running back in the NFL. I love Saquon to death. However, this is a guy, in my opinion, that's an obvious name to possibly start avoiding if he's, if you are a top 5 pick. Now, if you are at 6, 7, 8, and Saquon Barkley falls, I'm taking him, because that could be the number 1 running back in the draft. However, this is a guy, and the question is Saquon Barkley, where to take him round wise? Saquon Barkley is not getting out of the first round in any draft that you are in. Somebody is going to think that he stays healthy and will be the running back that everybody expects him to be. I personally know Saquon. I know his work ethic, and I know how much of a high pain tolerance he has. I am the size of his leg, of his calf. This dude played the Big Ten championship game my senior season on a sprained ankle that should keep running backs out for a month. He is going to be just fine, and if he is healthy, Joe Judge and Jason Garrett are going to utilize him. Keep in mind, Jason Garrett is the offensive coordinator who ran Zeke into the ground for his seasons down in Dallas. It's just, are you going to see the full workload early on in the season? I have a hard time believing that. He shredded the knee in week 2 of last year, like we've been talking about. He dropped to a borderline RB1-2 status because of it in a lot of people's rankings. There is a sense for me to avoid Saquon in the top 5. However, if you are lucky enough to get him in the second half of your first round, don't even think about pressing that button. I mean, you go for it.
Yeah, if he's fallen to 7, 8, 9, 10, or the beginning of the second, if that's possible.
Not likely. Not likely.
Yeah, you pull the trigger on him. I don't. Did you actually rank Kamara and Henry? Or
I haven't yet. We're just tackling Saquon for now, and then we'll get to Kamara and Henry, because
but-
that's part of this.
All right, I would take Kamara and Henry before Saquon, and I'd even think about taking Zeke before Saquon, only because of the injury risk and like coming off an injury like that and taking it slow, or at least that's what we're hearing from the Giants, is that's the plan, is to have him not take that amazing workload that we think he eventually will get to. If you think at the end of the season he's going to be fine, then yeah, you're going to want that stud for, the playoffs if you make it there, or even the playoff push if he's playing by that time. That, that's like 6, 7, 8 weeks in when you're really starting to make the push for the playoffs. I think Saquon could be that guy, and he's a Christian McCaffrey type who can do it all. He can run, but he can also catch it out of the backfield. And if he's going to combine all those, and he's going to be the focal point of the Giants offense, which isn't, the Giants aren't amazing. They have Kenny Golladay, but with Daniel Jones at under center, you don't really know what you're going to be getting necessarily. So if Barkley is his safety valve, which I think he has been for him in the past before he got injured, I would feel good about taking Saquon if he's fallen to you at that 6, 7, 8, 9 range. Before that, I wouldn't take him at 2. I wouldn't go out of my way to go, I think he's my guy, I'm going to take him at 2. No, I wouldn't do that. Take the Dalvin Cook, take the Alvin Kamara, take the Derrick Henry, and even take the Zeke even before you take him.
So I'm in this exact dilemma because in my frat league from college that we've been doing for years, I'm third. So I'm going to miss out on McCaffrey, and I already know I'm missing out on McCaffrey and Cook because the first 2 picks have been publicly announced.
Come on now.
So I've done a lot of digging into the dilemma of Kamara, Henry, or Saquon. And this is the conclusion. It is. And that's splitting hairs. That's splitting hairs, but that's the part of fantasy, especially early on in the first round. The way I look at it is Alvin Kamara, who was the top fantasy running back of last season, finished a position best 80% of his outings as a top 10 back. And this is a guy whose role in a Sean Payton offense is about as clear and consistent as they come. He's finished between 171 and 194 carries each of the past 3 seasons, while having 81, 81, 81, and 83 receptions in his first 4 seasons in the NFL. So pretty clear role for him. He's yet to finish a season lower than 5th at running back in targets, receptions, or receiving yards, and has finished top 2 in total touchdowns during 3 of the 4 seasons. There's a big but, though, right, Taylor? Drew Brees is gone. So what about this Saints offense that can you piece together for Alvin Kamara? Well, I'm assuming Jameis Winston is going to be the starter because Taysom Hill, he is what he is. I'm assuming they're going to at least go for it with Jameis. Keep in mind that Michael Thomas is out for a majority of the first half of the season, possibly even longer. Now there's rumblings he doesn't even want to play for the Saints.
Yep.
You don't really have that tight end anymore. Jimmy Graham's gone. You don't have look, Traquan Smith is your starting wide receiver 1 right now. Emmanuel Sanders is gone. He's up in Buffalo.
Yep.
So who's going to be receiving all of these targets from Jameis Winston? It's going to be Alvin Kamara. And if you were in a PPR league, I'm not panicking because probably his touchdown amount is going to be down this year. He's going to make up for that because he's about one of the only players that can be trusted in this offense. You're not asking Latavius Murray to take on more than he's already taken on. Latavius Murray's 31 years old. He's one of the best insurance policies in football, but he's not going to take over Alvin Kamara's role. I mean, that's just simply not going to happen. He signed that big contract. So Alvin Kamara is still going to be pretty damn good. Now, Derrick Henry, which, again, we're splitting hairs here. Derrick Henry. And Taylor, I don't know if I'm alone in this. I know I'm not. Maybe you're one of these people. I was always in the belief for the past couple years that I'd rather avoid Derrick Henry so I'm not burned by him rather than take him and hope that he has, the dominant line that he's had. I can do well elsewhere without taking Derrick Henry is more my point.
Yeah.
This year, it's going to be hard to ignore that because he's done it in back-to-back years now, where Henry, back in 2019, had 1,500 yards rushing on 303 touches, 16 touchdowns. If that wasn't good enough, he had 378 touches, had a 2,000-yard season, and 17 tutties last year on the ground. He has now led the league in carries, rushing yards, and rushing touchdowns in each of the past 2 years. He finished both of them as a top 5 fantasy back, despite totaling only 55 targets during that span, which is kind of my point. This Titans offense has kind of evolved a little bit this year. You have A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. Now, is Julio Jones at age 32 going to be the Julio we all know and love? Probably not. He's not even going to be the number one receiving option this year. There's a better offensive line. Ryan Tannehill, his success is based on Derrick Henry's success. There's not any threat to Derrick Henry in this offense when it comes to that backfield. The lack of receiving work does lead to the occasional bust, so you have to be willing to admit that, because if the Titans fall, Derrick Henry's role is kind of gone because they're going to be throwing the football.
Yep.
Now at 27 years old, has shown no signs of slowing down. He's a solid RB1 in PPR. However, I have to put him behind Kamara based on the fact that he does not have much of a role when they go pass heavy.
Yeah, I mean, Alvin Kamara is a guy. Well, if you look at the Saints, the only issue I would have with Alvin Kamara or taking him, and again, we're just splitting hairs here because if you end up with either one of these guys, you're happy. You're not going to be sad because you missed out on Alvin Kamara and had to settle for Derrick Henry. But is the fact that there's not a ton of real weapons other than Alvin Kamara. So you're going to think that most defenses are going to key in on Alvin Kamara and he's going to be the focal point of the defensive scheme, being that there's no other huge star. Assuming
was that way with Le'Veon. Was that way with Le'Veon
exactly.
too?
It's hard. You got to. That's one thing to be game planning for. It's another thing to stop it. So that's why I wouldn't shy away from taking him. I'm not going to be like, oh, because he's the only person on the field that you really worry about, that he's not going to be one of the top running backs in the league. And then with Derrick Henry, yeah, I could definitely remember like years ago where it was kind of a gamble to take him because you never knew exactly where you're going to get. But at this point, I mean, he is one of the best, if not the best running back in the league. And like he's going to put up these games where he's just going off for like 100 yards and 2 touchdowns or more. Will he have stinkers where, they stop the running game and try to throw the ball because they're down? Sure. But, if they still get in within 5 to 10, the red zone, like they can still turn to him and have him punch it in. So I think either one of these guys is a solid option, but yeah, if you're in PPR, you're getting extra points for Alvin Kamara's receiving, which is going to be a big part of what he does. So yeah, you have to give the nod slightly to Kamara, but splitting hairs here, either one of them is fine.
So when it comes to our fans' question of where is Saquon Barkley going to go, he's not getting out of the first round. However, we do value a guy like Alvin Kamara, a guy like Derrick Henry, possibly even Zeke before you get to Saquon. I'm not so sure about Zeke as well because of how pass heavy that offense is going to be. And Zeke has regressed every single season in the NFL. His statistics have gone down. Look, I get it. He's healthier. He lost some weight. Offensive line should be healthier. Maybe a more friendly game script. However,
Dak is
back.
For now, anyway.
I will take Saquon over Zeke as well, but no later than 8 or 9 should Saquon Barkley be on your board.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I could take Zeke over him. I mean, he has rumored to have lost weight, and he is gonna probably be looking heavy for a bounce back season, as he was just not good last year. And with Dak there, hopefully Dak stays. I'm thinking he's going to be back to kind of his old ways. I think Zeke is going to be a guy who's going to be one of the top running backs for sure. I would feel comfortable taking him even over Saquon, but if Saquon's fallen to you after all those guys are gone, yeah, you could probably take him. But the next couple guys on the list are
that's what I want to get to now that, we're outside of that top 6. There is a clear top 6. I think of running backs, and McCaffrey, Cook, Kamara, Saquon, Henry, and Zeke. Now it gets interesting, right? Now it's kind of like those guys, like, do I take that top wide receiver now? Do I take the running back? Do I dare take, let me tell you what, if you take Travis Kelce in the first round, like some of these mocks have, I'm going to smack you. That's a warning. That's something Brian Katie would do. I hope he knows that.
He's gonna hear that.
That's something Brian Katie's gonna do. He's gonna take Travis Kelce, and I'm gonna get up and smack him in the face. I'm just kidding, Brian. Jonathan Taylor at 7 at running back, which I know is your boy. We'll get to him in a second because I think things are changing for them. Austin Eckler at 8, Aaron Jones 9, Nick Chubb 10, DeAndre Swift 11. This has Cam Akers at 12. You can remove him off your draft boards because he ruptured his Achilles. Joe Mixon at 13. Nachi Harris at 14. Miles Sanders at 15. Antonio Gibson at 16. Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 17. Chris Carson at 18. J.K. Dobbins at 19. Josh Jacobs at 20. David Montgomery at 21. Myles Gaskin at 22. Chase Edmonds at 23, Travis Etienne at 24, and Mike Davis rounding out the top 25 at 25. So we listed off I'm not going past 25. I know a lot of people will go through and look for those depth guys. That's where our breakout stud and duds are going to come from. We'll pick guys from later on in the rankings, but we want to break down the top 25 of each ranking. Two starters for each team. You see where I'm going with this, folks.
Yeah.
So let's go to Jonathan Taylor. And while we're at it, that was another question that came up. And if you're watching on YouTube, you see the question. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, stay away from Colts weapons? ? With the injury to Quentin Nelson on the offensive line, with the injury to Carson Wentz at quarterback, all of a sudden, this Colts offense, Sam Ehlinger today took first team reps. And Ian Rappaport came out again today saying that the Colts are not exploring a trade in the quarterback market. So I guess my Nick Foles idea is kind of snuffed for now. Whatever.
Not happening.
You're our resident Colts fan. Is Jonathan Taylor the 7th best running back now in fantasy football?
No. Let's talk about first the injury to Quentin Nelson. It's the same injury as as Carson Wentz.
Yep.
Same timetable, 5 to 12 weeks. I would bet, if I was a betting man, I would bet that that's going to be on the sooner side rather than the later side. Whereas Carson might take 12 weeks to recover from this injury. Big Q is a tough guy. He's really tough. And I wouldn't be surprised if he plays week 1, even if it's just a 5 week and he comes back and he plays. If it's coming down to pain management, I think that he's a guy who's going to be out there. So I don't think he's going to miss as much time as maybe he possibly could. That's just my prediction. I have no fact in that at all. That's just literally what I think. I think Big Q will be out there to play. If not week 1, then week 2 or 3. He's not going to miss a ton of time. The question of whether Jonathan Taylor is going to be a top 10 running back is not a question of whether the offensive line will be healthy. I don't think. I think they're going to be fine overall when it comes down to it throughout the length of the season. The question is, how is he going to split between Jonathan Taylor, Marlon Mack, and Neiman Hines.
Ding, ding, ding. Uh-huh.
It's a 3-horse running back, a race in the backfield there. It is not one guy.
Three-horse race?
Yes, it's a 3-horse race. There's not one guy. It is not Jonathan Taylor's backfield alone. He is not going to, he may turn into the workhorse. Maybe. I think the baton is there. I think eventually they would love for him to take that from Marlon Mack, but they also just re-signed him. So I don't know. I think they like the two running back split, and that in fantasy is a death sentence. You do not want that because you don't know who's going to be the guy. And Marlon Mack is no scrub. Marlon Mack is a legit, he could have been a top 10 to 15 running back on his own if Jonathan Taylor wasn't there. And I think Jonathan Taylor could also be a top 10 to 15 running back. But the fact is they're both there. So they're going to split time. You're never going to know which day they're going to go off and which one's the other one's going to go off. And then you throw in Neiman Hines, who's more of the receiving back, and he's doing a lot of the receiving work. I don't know who's going to be the top running back for this offense. You
took all the words and all the points out of my mouth. Look, Taylor is a solid running back one, but the ceiling is limited because of the presence of Mack and Nyheim Hines. That's just what it is. And when I'm looking at getting my RB1, whether it be in the first or second round, I could do better than Jonathan Taylor, especially considering these rankings. And I'll start from there. I look at Aaron Jones, who is a part of the Green Bay Packers offense. And look, he is locked in as a solid RB1. You can get scared about A.J. Dillon all you want. Jamal Williams is gone. But this is a guy that is back, signed a new deal. He's 26 years old, has been a top 5 fantasy back in each of the past 2 years, ranked no lower than 15th in carries, no lower than 12th in targets among running backs among those campaigns. Aaron Rodgers trusts him. And as if we haven't said enough about Aaron Rodgers and the Packers on this show, it matters who Aaron Rodgers trusts. And outside of Devontae Adams, I think number 2 would be Aaron Jones. And I think that, yes, he may lose some goal line work to Dillon, but I don't think it matters. I think he's locked in as a solid RB1. There's not as much of a threat for losing time for Aaron Jones than it is for Jonathan Taylor, especially when it comes to game script, because with the Packers being who the Packers are, pass heavy with Aaron Rodgers, that doesn't hurt Aaron Jones like it would Jonathan Taylor. So, and if they try to kill clock, you're still going to see Aaron Jones. Nick Chubb, I mean, he could be a top 5 running back this year. I just love everything about Nick Chubb. Do not be scared about Kareem Hunt, guys. I mean, Kareem Hunt's good, but that pass offense is centered around both Chubb and Kareem Hunt, as well as obviously the run game, because keep in mind, Odell Beckham, and we're going to get to wide receivers in a little bit, but Odell Beckham Jr. is coming off a torn ACL, and really outside of Jarvis Landry, you have Austin Hooper at tight end, but they relied so much on that good, very good offensive line and those 2 running backs for Baker's success. So I have Chubb ahead of Taylor. DeAndre Swift out of Detroit, I think, would be a strong consideration as well. I love Joe Mixon this year. And I talked about the Bengals offense before with all the weapons. The offensive line still needs improvement, but because of how many weapons are in this Bengals offense, they're going to be putting points up on the board. Oh, by the way, Giovanni Bernard is good. Mixon's outlook, in my opinion, is on the upswing. He's a good second round running back target with RB1 upside, so keep an eye on him. I'm going to skip a name because he's my breakout. I might have given it away, but I'm going to skip a specific running back on this list. I hope you don't mention him because he is my breakout. Just to round out, look, Antonio Gibson, you already talked about Ryan Fitzpatrick and how much you like this Washington football team offense. Antonio Gibson's going to be a big part of that. Now, is he your RB1? Now, we're starting to get into guys. Hopefully, you have another running back at this point, because starting from now, these are not guys that should be your RB1. No, Antonio Gibson, not. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think you are going to see a post-hype sleeper that could regain RB1 value because of the offense that he's in, and just granted to the fact that he is in the Chiefs offense. There's not much competition as much as there was last year for touches in that offense. Andy Reid compares him to Brian Westbrook, and that rings a bell in my head that ding, 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 he's going to be out there for all three situations out there, first, second, and third down. So that if you're getting him in the second round, absolutely can't, and we'll get to some of these guys later on, but Chris Carson, Dobbins, Jacobs, Montgomery, Gaskin, they're all in the similar area of consistency. Can't go wrong with some of them for an RB2, but not an RB1.
Yeah, so a lot of these guys you hope are not going to be your RB1. One guy on the edge of the list, who on my list, I'm not sure on your list because our lists apparently are a little different. Austin Eckler, who's a guy who is definitely a guy I would take if we're talking about Jonathan Taylor right now, over Jonathan Taylor for sure. But guys like Aaron Judge, Nick Chubb, Antonio Gibson, Joe Mixon, Najee Harris, Swift, and Clyde
Aaron Jones, not Aaron Judge.
Yeah, not
Aaron Judge is the right fielder for the
Aaron Jones. Antonio Gibson, Joe Mixon, Najee Harris, Swift, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire are all guys. Even Miles Sanders, I would almost want to take over Jonathan Taylor. And listen, I'm a Colts fan, and I love Jonathan Taylor. There's no don't get me wrong.
The future. If I was in a dynasty league, Jonathan Taylor is very high on my list when it comes to running backs.
I love Jonathan Taylor. The problem is literally that I also love Marlon Mack. Like, I think I would have drafted Marlon Mack, and a few years ago, he was my RB1. And I think I traded you for him, or something. It was either you or someone else. I traded to get Marlon Mack.
Yeah, it was me. I forget what we did. Yeah, I did give you Mack.
But I went for Mack and I got him, and I did not entirely regret it. He was good. I mean, I think he got hurt at some point, which was unfortunate, but still, he was a good guy. And so I love both of them. And so they both take away from each other, not to mention Neiman Hines, which we didn't even go into a ton, but he's also going to be there taking a lot of the third down passing reps. And yeah, all those guys you listed, I mean, Nick Chubb, you worry about him splitting a bit with Kareem Hunt, but still, when it comes down to the overall rushing attack, if you have him even as your running back one, if you're on the end of the first round and you take a Nick Chubb, I think you're going to be overall happy with what you get. Are there going to be some games maybe where Kareem Hunt takes on a bigger role? Sure. But day in and day out, you're going to be probably mostly satisfied with what you get with Nick Chubb. Antonio Gibson, I love that Washington offense. I think it's going to be better than many people may think. Joe Mixon is a guy who I know some people are like scarred from taking him because he either gets hurt or he doesn't perform. But, at some point he's going to be that workhorse guy and go off. And this might be the year to do it. And
I had him last year and he won me a championship.
Yeah. I also like DeAndre Swift. And like you said, with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, just anyone involved in that Kansas City offense is worth taking a look at. Even like guys like Mecole Hardman and stuff, well, I mean, he's elevated now that Sammy Watkins is gone, but just anyone involved in that offense, even around it, is someone you can look at and put stock in because they're gonna put up points. They always do.
All right, it's that time for the running back position. Stud, dud, and breakout. Who is going to be your stud, Taylor, for the 2021 fantasy football season at the running back position?
All right, so we talked about your stud in quarterback, which was Justin Herbert. So my stud for running back is going to be his running back, Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler is going to put up massive numbers. He is a guy who is the same type of ilk as Christian McCaffrey or Dalvin Cook, or not Dalvin Cook, well, kind of, Alvin Kamara and Saquon Barkley, where he's going to do a lot of the receiving work as well as rushing work. And I think it's going to be an explosive offense. I think the Chargers are going to put up a ton of points. And I think Austin Eckler is going to be the guy that he could definitely win you a league or two if you have him, especially in a PPR league, because he's just going to be a PPR monster. His floor is going to be absolutely ridiculous. You're going to be able to rely on him day in and day out, or week in and week out, I should say, to put up at least, I think a floor is 15 points at least in fantasy. And then days where he goes into the end zone a couple times, he could go upwards of 30 points and win you league. So that's my stud, Austin Eckler.
Okay. I'm going to go with, and I'm not going to use him as a breakout. I'm going to use him immediately as my stud, Nachi Harris out of Pittsburgh. Guys,
I knew that's why I didn't talk about him.
Yep, I avoided him for this reason because I wanted him in this segment. Harris was taken out of Alabama, 24th overall for the Pittsburgh Steelers. When it comes to standout running back prospects, Harris is a damn unicorn. He is massive. He's 6'2", 230 pounds, but is also an outstanding receiver. This is a guy that is going to come in as the undisputed lead back. He is a 3-down back. He is going to be out there for pass catching situations as well. I have heard early comparisons, fair or not, to Le'Veon Bell when it comes to his role in this Pittsburgh Steelers offense. And when I'm thinking about Le'Veon Bell's role and what he did for this Steelers offense, with Ben Roethlisberger not exactly being a spring chicken, possibly having to check down, this Steelers offense, what they ran into trouble with last year was they couldn't rely on the run game. And that is their bread and butter. They wanted to rely on that run game like they did with Le'Veon Bell and hope James Conner was able to do, and they simply couldn't. This is a remade offensive line. It's going to be centered and catered around Nachi Harris. And guys, he is going mid to late second round. If I start off a draft with, say, a Kamara and a Nachi Harris, I think I've already won the league. Nachi Harris he's immediately a mid-range RB2 with the chance and the opportunity to be the fantasy football MVP for 2021.
Yeah. I didn't talk about him because I knew that this is where you were going. Yeah. And I totally agree. I mean, just look at the Steelers and how they've operated the past couple of years, especially because you have Big Ben, who I already talked about is my dud. So I don't think their throwing game is going to be all that special unless they run it through off of play action with Najee Harris as the main threat there. But you look at you pull it back to a James Conner. Was James Conner a guy that you thought was going to set the world on fire? I mean, he's never thought in a million years he was going to come close, though. Exactly. And what did he do? He was really good behind the Pittsburgh offensive line and with the Pittsburgh scheme. And so now you plug in a guy who is a physical specimen and who is used to ground and pound type Alabama game. So you put him behind that offensive line with that scheme, and sky's the limit for this guy right now. He could easily finish as a top 5 running back in the league, and I wouldn't be surprised. And like you said, if you end up getting, an Alvin Kamara, any of those top guys, those top 6 guys that we talked about, minus say Saquon because there's more risk there, but you get any one of those guys, and then you pair it with Najee Harris as your RB2. Ooh, you're sitting pretty. Yeah, you're sitting pretty good, and I think anybody should be happy with a start like that for their fantasy football draft. Honestly, I'd be surprised if his ADP doesn't rise a bit when we get closer to September. I think you're already seeing it, and I've noticed it in mocks lately because of the clear role that they've seen so far in the preseason. Granted, it's only been one game, but the clear role that Najee Harris is going to have out of the gate, I think is attractive for a lot of people. They're going to run him into the ground. This is what the Steelers do with running backs. Yeah. They run them into the ground when they're on the cheap. Rookie running backs are guys that can come in and immediately they can be just fantastic. I remember Kareem Hunt when he came into the league. He was immediate for the first game they played. I remember because I drafted him and I had him as my fantasy guy, and he was obviously on the Chiefs back then. And the first game they played the Patriots, I think he had 3 touchdowns and like almost 200 yards between air and ground. Like running backs are the most plug and play position, I think, in football. And if you're a stud in college, you could easily come out and be a stud immediately. Zeke, same thing, stud first year. Saquon, he was a stud. These guys can easily be studs immediately out of the gate. And so don't not draft him because, oh, he's a rookie. Do it, and don't regret it. You won't regret it. Just press enter.
Who are you going to regret? Let's talk about our regrets, Taylor. Some duds for the running back position moving forward.
Dud for the running back position. Besides saying don't take Jonathan Taylor in the top just because of everything we talked about, I think my dud, I think it's going to be J.K. Dobbins for me. J.K. Dobbins,
okay.
I mean, he's not super high, but people are taking him as their second running back, and maybe it's just me having PTSD from having him last season. He wasn't very good at all, and I don't trust him to be the guy.
To your point, their running back is Lamar. Lamar's their quarterback and running back.
Exactly. And so I don't trust him to be consistent. Whether he has a couple good games, I'm sure he might be better than he was last season, because last season he was bad. Like, he was unstartable in fantasy. I couldn't ever rely on him. He had maybe one good game where he had he was startable, but if he's not getting the receptions and he's not getting the runs because, it's Lamar running, I think there's so many better people you can get at his position. I mean, like Chris Carson, David Montgomery, Myles Gaskin, Darrell Henderson, Josh Jacobs, Mike Davis, all those guys, even Kareem Hunt, I would look at maybe taking before J.K. Dobbins.
I mean, more looking at it, I do agree with you, and his ADP is very high for what you're going to get, which he could be enough to have RB2 production, but I think there's value elsewhere. Especially if you start off like we talked about with two maybe higher end running backs. I think you could do better than Dobbins. Another guy that's going ADP somewhere in the range of 20 to 24 is Josh Jacobs for the Raiders, and that is my dud. He returns as the lead back in Vegas. There's no denying that. However, he does have competition for touches with Kenyon Drake, who has had some success with the Cardinals this year. Jacobs has finished 8th at running back in fantasy points in 2020. He ranked no lower than 8th in carries, rushing yards, and touchdowns. However, his efficiency was horrible. And if you dive deeper into the numbers when it goes to Jacobs, across the board, compared to his rookie year, they were down. And he's simply not much of a factor as a receiver even before Drake arrived, and that is why Kenyon Drake is there. And we talked about the same thing about Jonathan Taylor, right, Taylor? I mean, if you're not involved in the run game, you don't know who's going to – I mean, the Raiders are going to be behind significantly a lot of the time this season. Kenyon Drake is going to be the guy getting all those targets. It's not going to be Josh Jacobs. How many times are the Raiders this year going to be in positive game script for Jacobs to have a good game, which would be 20 to 25 carries, maybe bulldozes to 90 to 100 yards and a touchdown? That's probably your ceiling for a guy like Josh Jacobs. To me, low ceiling, like I mentioned. He only had 3 top 10 fantasy weeks last season, and like I said, that's even without Drake and not much competition in the backfield. He's an uninspiring, to me, flex running back at best this season for me.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that happening. I mean, I have no qualms about anything you just said. I wouldn't take him, I don't think. Not at the position that we have him, but if he falls to you and you want to take a flyer,
if it's depth, sure. I mean, like I said, if he's my RB3, by all means. But I look, there's guys that we might talk about breaking out. I mean, David Montgomery will be there, Myles Gaskin, Chase Edmonds, ETN, Kareem Hunt. There's just other guys that are more aspiring to me that are down the rankings chart that I would take over Jacobs. But
I mean, at least he's a starter, and he has a clearly. Well, I mean, I was about to say that, but he doesn't. He used to have a clearly defined role, but they
Mhm.
brought in Kenyon Drake, and now the role is kind of up in question because Kenyon Drake is such a weird guy because he it seems like he's never really the starter. I mean, he's billed as a starter, but he's always like splitting a backfield, and he's always like eating into other players, or other players are eating into his production. And
Kenyon
so
Drake's the reason why
don't
David
like
Johnson's no longer a Cardinal.
Exactly. And that's the thing is like he just kind of eats away. He's like a parasite on other players' fantasy value.
There
And
you
he
go.
never really has his own value because I've had him on my team before, Kenyon Drake. And aside from what was it in Miami when he had that run where he was just like amazing. Other than that, it's just been kind of weird. Like you can't really trust him. So,
all right, let's go to our breakout stars for the running back position. There's a lot of interesting names that could be of choice here. Taylor, take it away.
All right, my breakout star that I'm going to talk about, and I think he has the potential. He's paired with his college quarterback.
Yeah, here we go. I knew you were taking it.
I think
fucker.
that he could have a great season, and I'm talking about Travis Etienne Jr. in Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence. He's a guy who can run, he can catch, he's trusted by his quarterback. He can and probably will be a pretty big safety valve for Trevor Lawrence because he trusts him. Obviously, they played together at Clemson, and I really like Travis Etienne, especially the place you can get him. You can get him down below Josh Jacobs, Mike Evans, or Mike Davis, Chase Edmonds, Kareem Hunt, and then Travis Etienne right there. He's a guy that I would look at, and if he ends up being your second running back, you feel okay. If you can get him at flex, that would be even better. I mean, if you can have him as your flex, I think you're feeling great.
Travis Etienne is a guy that I think a lot of people are getting scared of because of the presence of James Robinson, who was really good last year. I mean, he was a top 5 running back last year. James Robinson, really, really productive. Urban brought in Etienne. They've been using him in the slot. And I've used this comparison with Najee. I'm going to use it again. They're using him like Le'Veon Bell. And that kind of seems like the trend that it's going for ETN. I'm not as high on ETN as I am on Nachi Harris for obvious reasons because he still will be sharing a backfield. But I agree with you. ETN's, I mean, he will be in the RB2 mix in PPR with the chance to blow James Robinson out of the game plan completely by the second half of the year. And that's what you're looking at with some of these rookies, right? I mean, it's not so much the first 6 weeks, but once they get more acclimated to the NFL, more involved in the game plan, what is Travis Etienne going to be for you moving forward towards the most important part of the season, which is your fantasy football playoffs? And my guess would be, like you said, a very big part of what the Jaguars are going to try to do. And obviously Trevor Lawrence will trust him.
Yeah, especially like you said, like if they're moving around, putting him in the slot and stuff, they don't have to strictly have him be the guy in the backfield doing the running, especially if they want to split time. But I could see him taking over a lot of the backfield duties, and especially being the guy in the passing game, and especially like he's walking in and he's already going. I would think he would already be one of Trevor Lawrence's favorite targets, just by virtue of knowing him and feeling comfortable with him and knowing what he can do. And so I think they're going to try to get him the ball as much as possible. And I think he's going to do wonders, especially in PPR. I mean, can't stress this enough. If you're in PPR, like these guys who are going to be coming out of the backfield and maybe not even being in the backfield, lining up as receivers, even when they're running backs, that's extra value you're getting just by the fact that he could be targeted and get a reception. That's half a point right there. Half a point, you get 10 yards. That's a point right there. And there you go. You're slowly making your way. It makes for the floor can be really low on these guys, or really high on these guys.
My breakout, and it's not going to be a full-on breakout, but I think he's going to take that leap and into fantasy football elite tier this season, and that's Myles Gaskin out of the Dolphins.
I almost went with him.
Gaskin was one of the bigger surprises of last year. He won the lead back gig out of camp and went on to play 69% of the team's offensive snaps when he was active, and he was RB8 in those fantasy weeks. He was held without a top 20 fantasy week in his first 4 weeks before finishing no lower than 17th in the final 6 games that he played last year. He was competent as a rusher, exceptional as a receiver, which we talk about time and time again on today's episode of PPR, especially if you're in a PPR league. He's going to be heavily involved in the offense.
Those are the money guys.
Correct. Finished 7th among running backs in receiving yards thanks to an 87% catch rate, which was second best among running backs all of last season, with some pretty elite company there. Miami's only notable running back acquisition this offseason was Malcolm Brown. So Gaskin is locked in as the lead running back in Miami this year, and they're going to try to alleviate the pressure off Tua as they did last year. They're going to rely on that run game. That's what this team is built around, is defense and controlling time of possession, and that screams Myles Gaskin. I think he enters this year as a borderline RB1, definite RB2. I love what Myles Gaskin is bringing to the table heading into this season.
Yeah, I was this close to picking him as my breakout too. So I'm glad I changed it up so that we had different ones. But yeah, he was going to be my guy because, I think he's taken over that Miami backfield. At least it seems to be. And anyone who takes over the backfield, my mic just fell apart. Anyone who can take over the backfield and kind of be the feature back, whether he forces his way into it or not, I think that he can definitely be a guy with a full season under his belt in this run happy, especially if you don't trust Tua, which you don't personally.
Nope, do not.
Yeah, so if you're feeling that way about Tua and you think that the ground game is where Miami is going to be their bread and butter, which I would agree, the touches are going to be there, and where the touches are, that's where the points are.
Absolutely.
Touches are most important.
Absolutely. So we're 2 positions in, 2 positions to go, and Taylor, I will buy you some time here and let you fix your mic that fell apart to remind. Oh, you fixed it? Well, good. I still have to remind our folks. Okay. Well, I still have to remind our listeners that even though we are talking about football, it still is summertime. The temperatures are still rising here in the capital region. It's August. It's finally hot. Finally. But that also means that it's trade-in season. And a lot of dealers are out there looking for your trade-in right now. There's shortage of inventory in the market, as we have been talking about all summer long. So if you are definitely one of those people looking to maximize the value of your car, but not sure what to do once you get the money in your hands, go to Mohawk Honda, because not only do they give you that top dollar that I just mentioned for your trade-in, they also have acres and acres of inventory for you to choose from. They have the largest inventory of vehicles in the capital region up here in upstate New York, and that means you could choose the one that's right for you. Some other dealers like to talk about their values, but at Mohawk Honda, they'd rather show you theirs. That's in value in their selection, but more importantly, they value in how you're treated there at Mohawk Honda. So don't go to these other ones, and like I said, go for it. If you want to go to these other dealers, I'm not stopping you. But don't feel pressured into buying something from these other dealers, because that's the best that they can do, and you're going to settle because you're not truly going to be happy with what you end up getting. Go to Mohawk Honda, buy the vehicle you deserve. Their vast selection of certified pre-owned vehicles is guaranteed to fit your needs, your lifestyle, and not the other dealers' so-called values. So this summer, and summer is quickly dwindling down, so while it is summer, selection is king, and no one has more to choose from than Mohawk Honda, where they always go out of their way to please you. Taylor, we're an hour and a half in, two positions down now. These next 2 positions, the wide receiver is more lengthy, but the tight end is not.
I would think the tight end we're going pretty quick.
If you're looking for our defensive special teams breakdown and kicker breakdown, this is not the podcast for you. So move along.
We're not going to do a kicker breakdown?
No, I'm sorry. Go draft Justin Tucker, and after that, I don't know what else to tell you. Let's go to the wide receiver position, and I've talked to a couple friends of mine. One of my buddies who's very, very into fantasy football like I am. It's almost like a sickness. We were talking about this being the deepest wide receiver group in recent memory when it comes to drafting for fantasy purposes. And a lot of that has to contribute to a lot of teams are drafting these big time wide receivers out of college. And a lot of teams are going to 3 wide receiver sets. And there's a lot of teams that have 3 relevant wide receivers on the roster. So when we talked about how you're looking at your early rounds, I'm in the personal belief that you can get away with going after running backs early because of the value that you can get way later in the draft at the wide receiver position. That's going to be comparable to what you can get at the top of this list.
Yeah, I'm always a proponent of that. I was going to ask you at some point your early strategy. Do you go like running back and then try to get like one of those top wide receivers or not? My personal strategy, and I think you probably agree, is, I mean, I go running back, and maybe even a third running back before I'm looking at wide receivers, unless there's a guy who like really I need to get.
We're going to talk about my logic, and I don't want to give too much away because we are going to be competing this year against each other, and a lot of the Godzilla media family will be listening to our episode. And I don't want to give away all my secrets. But typically it depends where I am in the first round, but I'll just relate because I don't know where we're picking in our draft specifically, but I have 1 and 3 in the 2 leagues that I'm in so far. So I'm definitely going to be doing running back in the first round, obviously, but then in the second round, I'm so close that unless there's like a Nachi Harris that fell or a guy that I really, really love at the running back position fell, there's good value, like getting a stud wide receiver like like a DeAndre Hopkins, a DK Metcalf, a Calvin Ridley. One of those guys tends to be slipping because people are jumping in on those running backs, as you should, because running backs are going to go quick. That's just how it goes. But if I could get one of those 3 guys, knowing that they're going to be a difference maker for me, and then get a comparable RB2 after that, typically I'm pretty happy with that. But I have some years leaned that way and gone 3 straight running backs and filled where I need to fill after that. I definitely agree with you there.
Yeah, it definitely depends on where you draft, because obviously if you're doing a snake draft, you if you have one of the first 3-4 picks, then you're picking at the end of the second round. I prefer to have a kind of middle to even late round. The double pick at the end, I mean, I kind of have a fondness for it. Like if you're in, say, 12 teams, you get 12, then you pick 12 and then 13 back to back. I kind of like doing that because then you can get the running back or whatever that fell. Say Saquon falls all the way to that last pick, or you can even get like an Austin Eckler or something like right there, and then turn around and get like a Nachi Harris or something. That's value right there. And you can even flip flop, and at the end of the year, you might look and be like, oh, well, Nachi Harris probably could have gone in that first round, and then you have Austin Eckler, who's like a solid second round guy, and you end up having him, even though you took him first, if you get that value on the back end with running back. But I can definitely see if you're staring at, one of those wide receivers who have a lot of value, going wide receiver with their second pick, but I tend to go running back.
Well, for me, like when I'm picking one, like it doesn't matter because I have that loop. I have the last pick in the second and the first pick in the third. So it potato, and really the third too. Like there's only 4 picks in between. So I don't know. It really does depend where you are. If you're on the back end, like if you're in that 8 to 10 range, 8 to 12 range, I would definitely consider going running back, because by the time your third round comes around, you're not going to have much to select from. So it really is dependent on where you are. Let's go to some of these wide receivers real quick. And we're not going to spend much time on the obvious ones, because there's just so much depth that I think we want to talk about more of the guys like outside of the top 10 moving forward. So I'm just going to mention the guys in the top 10. We'll go the next 25 after that, because that's kind of the meat of the wide receivers. Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, duh. Stephon Diggs, duh. DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, come on now. DK Metcalf, man amongst boys. Calvin Ridley, the new wide receiver 1 in Atlanta. AJ Brown, Keenan Allen. This list has Michael Thomas at 9. You got to get rid of him. Justin Jefferson at 9. the new number 9, and then Terry McLaurin rounds out the top 10. All those guys are studs, and I know you want to talk about Terry, so I'll let you talk about Terry. Justin Jefferson suffered a little bit of a AC joint sprain. He should be good to go to start the year, but I'm with you on Terry McLaurin, but I'll let you say why Terry McLaurin is on the verge of being not only a top 10 wide receiver, but he could compete for top 5 with a new quarterback in DC.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, is that he's always been pretty good, and you can tell because when he had Dwayne Haskins as his quarterback, he still managed. He was still putting up decent numbers, not amazing numbers, but they were decent. But the thing is, you could see like the only thing that was holding him back, it wasn't anything he was doing. It was the fact that he had a quarterback who was, Dwayne Haskins. It was the quarterback position was holding him back. And so now you go in with a guy who's Ryan Fitzpatrick. Is Ryan Fitzpatrick amazing? No. Is he a great, quote unquote, great quarterback? No. But is he a guy that likes to sling it? Absolutely. And so if you get Terry McLaurin, who's already, I think, one of the better wide receivers in the league, and you pair him with a guy who can actually get him the ball, hopefully, especially get him to the ball in space, who can like chuck the ball down the field and really let him fly and not throw it over his head, I really think Terry McLaurin can shine. And I mean, he only got in the end zone, I think, 4 times last season, but that's going to go up. I guarantee that's going to go up.
Another guy that I think is on the verge of surprising a lot of people is Allen Robinson, who comes in at number 12 on the fantasy football rankings, and he seems to be sliding all the time because people are just simply scarred of the quarterback play out in Chicago, which I don't blame you, right? I mean, you've suffered through Mitch Trubisky for the past couple years. You've had a couple veteran backups go through. Allen Robinson has really yet had the benefit his entire NFL career of playing with a top-end quarterback. And if we talked about what's going to happen, if Justin Fields enters the picture more earlier than later, he has that top wide receiver that he can automatically go to, and that is Allen Robinson. And in his prime at 28 years old, he's a borderline wide receiver 1 in fantasy who's had some really bad luck in the touchdown department because of the lack of targets, simply because the quarterback play was not good. This is a guy that I think is on the verge of surprising a lot of people, and there's value to be had considering where he's ranked at the wide receiver position at 12.
Yeah, and it also just comes down to the quarterback position. If you're taking him and you're assuming that Justin Fields is going to be the guy eventually, then you might feel a little bit better about it. I personally don't love him as where he is. I might want to take guys like below him, like CeeDee Lamb or Amari Cooper, Robert Woods for sure. I mean, we talked about it in the quarterback. My stud was Matthew Stafford, and 2 of the main guys he's going to be throwing to is Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. I think both of them are going to be studs this year, and I would take maybe one or both of them over Allen Robinson just because you don't know. And we said earlier that quarterback redshirt years don't really exist anymore, but they have happened in recent memory. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is a big one where obviously Patrick Mahomes probably could have played in his first year. I mean, the guy came out and won an MVP his second year.
But Alex Smith still had the Chiefs locked in with a first round bye. I think that's the difference. A lot of people seem to forget the Bears don't have an Alex Smith.
Yeah, they don't, but they have an Andy Dalton, and I mean, he's QB1, man. So I don't know what to tell you. I mean, no, I don't think he's going to stay in the whole year. If I were to bet, I would bet that he wouldn't stay the whole year, but you never know. And I like to take guys that I think are going to be studs no matter what happens. And I think guys underneath him might fit that bill.
Another guy that I think is getting slept on a little bit is Chris Godwin. And granted, Chris Godwin is one of those guys. He missed 4 regular season games in 2020. But if we include the playoffs, he appeared in 16 games and posted a healthy 81 targets for over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. That would have been good enough for a wide receiver 15 finish during the regular season. Yeah, that was a step down from his line in 2019, but this is a guy that had more targets than Evans, had more targets than Antonio Brown, paced that trio with 71 targets, but was limited to 125 fantasy points because of the injury. He's one of the league's best wide receivers in catch rate and yards after the catch in each of the past 2 years. The ceiling is a little limited because of all the mouths to feed, but this is a guy, knowing Brady and his check down tendencies, Godwin is going to serve as kind of that, not Julian Edelman type role, but definitely the guy. Like Evans is the red zone target. Godwin is that intermediate target that can blow a simple check down reception and turn it into a big play. He has big time playmaking ability. He is a back end wide receiver too, but because of most leagues being PPR, boost that value up a little bit because he is good for 5 to 10 receptions a game.
Yeah, I believe I had him possibly last year, and he was good overall. He had some dud games and he had some great games. But I guess the problem is with these teams that have two kind of stud level wide receivers, it's hard to choose between them. Between Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, which one you'd probably take is probably Mike Evans, but I could easily see Godwin outpacing him in fantasy.
And that's in my rankings wise, like people want to fall in love with Evans. I'm going Godwin over Evans. I would take a bet now that Chris Godwin will have more fantasy points than Mike Evans at the end of the season. I
wouldn't call you crazy. And that's the thing where it's if you're drafting, it's hard for me. It's the same thing with kind of like CD Lamb and Amari Cooper. So where
and I like CD over Amari.
This is of course. Let's preface it with being Dak being healthy. But
correct.
Yeah, you got those two guys, and it's like, which one do you choose? Because they're both good. I suppose if you have one or the other, you're just gonna have to live with it. They're gonna outshine each other some days. More than not, they're not both going to go off probably most games. And so I like CeeDee Lamb a lot, but man, if you're making me pick between them, I really don't know. I don't trust Amari Cooper through and through. So I guess I'm probably going to go CeeDee Lamb. I've had Amari Cooper and he's burned me a couple times because sometimes he just doesn't show up or he doesn't get targets. He's taking all the looks from the defense and he's just not there. And same with Mike Evans. Mike Evans, I feel like, is a lot more injury prone if I had to pick between the two. So I think Godwin is very much the safer bet between the two. But then what about guys like Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp? You take Woods over Kupp?
Yeah, and I think he's just simply, when it comes to Robert Woods, he's one of the most underappreciated players in fantasy.
I agree.
He was wide receiver 15 in fantasy during 12 healthy games last year, or in 2017, and has appeared in 15 plus games each of the past 3 years and finished all three as a top 14 fantasy wide receiver. His usage is consistent. His target shares over the past 4 years, 24%, 25%, 23%, 24%. So he has a significant role in the Rams offense. He's finished no lower than 3rd in snaps, 11th in routes. He was over his head in the touchdown department in 2020, which was 8, but he also adds value as a rusher because they use him out of the backfield, which is interesting. He's a low ceiling but solid wide receiver too that you can rely on consistent production. By the way, he has that boost in quarterback that we've mentioned multiple times already on this show, which is that in Matthew Stafford. But you can't go wrong with Cooper Kupp either. I mean, this is a guy, and this is what I was talking about when we opened up this wide receiver segment. A lot of these teams have significant 3 wide receiver sets that you can rely on. All these guys. I mean, we just mentioned the Bucks. We just mentioned the Cowboys, the Rams. You could talk about the Bengals with Boyd and Chase and Higgins. Go on with the Niners and Ayuk and Debo. You have the Eagles with Rager and Devontae Smith. You have
Seattle with Lockett and
Seattle and Lockett and DK Metcalf. You have the decaf. I want
You
some
should call him that
decaf.
from now on. Decaf.
You have the Steelers with Deontay Johnson and Juju. I'm just going down the list. Carolina with Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore. The Jaguars now with Laviska Shenault and DJ Chark. I mean, Miami with Parker and Waddle and Fuller. I mean, and this is my point, guys. You can find depth. I mean, I'm going down to 60, and that's where Darnell Mooney, who I know you want to talk about, is. I'm not going to mention his name because I think he's for our next segment. But I mean, you look at the value, and I'm not saying these are some of these guys you want starting, but there's value, and the running backs are going to go and get your running backs because there's value later on.
Yeah, for sure. That's always been my strategy, and especially this year. I mean, there's so many guys, and any one of them can have a breakout season because you look. Oh, little motorcycle guy going by.
Oh boy. Get her done.
But yeah, you like, and then you have guys who are gonna have breakout seasons or possible breakout season. You look at guys like Chase Claypool last year. No one expected him to go out and do it, but then he does, and then you have value there. So you can definitely find value. Even I'm looking down like at this list, and 39 for me. I don't know where he is ranked for you, but 39, Jerry Jeudy. For the Denver Broncos, and I love.
They got him at 42 here.
Yeah, he doesn't have an amazing quarterback in Drew Lock, but you never know. He might even get, if they get lucky, they might get a Deshaun Watson.
He's a risky pick, and certainly not somebody that I want in my starting lineup, but somebody that I want to stash on my bench, and maybe the connection is there. Like you look at what's surrounding Jeudy, and you look at Landry, who's going to be the wide receiver one in Cleveland, Laviska Shenault, Hollywood Brown, Gallup, Devontae Smith, Devontae Parker, Corey Davis, Antonio Brown. I'm taking Antonio Brown before I take Jerry Jeudy. Jalen Waddle, I think I'd like before Jeudy. But, yeah, I mean, to our point,
that's
wide receiver is deep. Let's go to our stud, dud, and breakout because we're nearing 2 hours here, and we have tight ends to go. Look, this is a fantasy football special, guys, and I appreciate you guys hanging in. We're breaking it down. You don't have to listen to the show all at once, but this is going to be a perfect tune-up to get you guys ready for your drafts.
I'm fairly certain that this conversation right now might end up being in a part 2 if Gaz splits it, but. If you're listening to part 2 and you're down for fantasy, we're down for it. We love talking about it. So we're here to help. If you are questioning any of these guys, we're trying to break it down to the best of our ability, so you can have a fun draft and have a fun season. Maybe win some money or something. Yeah.
Besides the guys in Godzilla Media, we want you guys to win. So we're putting you in the best position that we feel that we could do that. If you're the Travis and Rigney show, or you're Brian Cady, or you're Gaz, get the hell out of here. All right.
Yeah. Stop listening. Stop listening to our strategies.
But no, let's move on to stud, dud, and breakout here for the wide receiver positions. Take it away, Taylor. Who's going to be your stud? And I have a feeling we already talked about him, but maybe you have somebody else in mind that you're going to go with. Your stud for wide receiver.
I could probably pick a different one. But why the hell not? I'll just stick with Terry McLaurin. He's my guy. I think
double down.
Breakout season. I will double down on him. I think he's going to be a favorite target of Ryan Fitzpatrick. And man, we've seen Ryan Fitzpatrick throw for 500 yards, 400 yards, back-to-back games, just doing nonsense. And even if it's in garbage time, and you think Washington sucks and you think that they're going to be down, then sure, it'll be in garbage time. But you know what garbage time is great for? Fantasy. It's great for fantasy. And so I think he's going to be chucking it up a lot of times. Maybe they get down. I mean, their defense is pretty good. They might end up being a pretty decent team overall. But I think that connection is going to be solid. I think Ryan Fitzpatrick provides a strong floor for Terry McLaurin. I think he's going to get into the end zone more than the 4 times he got into last year. I think he's going to get targets. I think he's going to get receptions. I think he is going to be a stud this year. And you can get him in, maybe the 3rd round, maybe, depending on how people are going.
Now, I'm talking about studs here. So he's high on the list. However, he's still not being considered a top 5 fantasy wide receiver. And I think he's going to be the number 1. I'll say it now on this show. I think he's going to be the number 1 wide receiver this year. In ink, put it in cement. You heard it here on the Sports with the Z and a T podcast. If you're still listening this long, Calvin Ridley for the Falcons after spending the first 2 years in Julio Jones's shadow, resulting in 0 top 20 fantasy campaigns. He finished no lower than 9th Taylor among wide receivers and targets, receiving yards, touchdowns, and end zone targets in 2020. He was fantasy's number 5 scoring wide receiver. And during the 7 games Julio missed, you kind of got a taste of what it could be with Calvin Ridley next year. He managed a 31% share and was wide receiver 3 in fantasy football. Considering Julio is now in Tennessee, Ridley is now Matt Ryan's unquestioned top option. His top competition is probably tight end Kyle Pitts. And who knows how – now, look, we're going to get to Kyle Pitts here in a second, but – who's to say Kyle Pitts is going to come in and have an immediate, crazy impact like I don't know. You can't even really think of a top tight end that came in with a crazy impact at the tight end position. I can't. Not off the top of my head. We'll talk about it. But considering he's the second best option, Russell Gage isn't taking away anything. Now, Arthur Smith does bring a run-oriented scheme, so that could cut into Ridley's volume a little bit. But considering Mike Davis is the top running back and don't really know what they're going to get out of the running back position, and considering Atlanta, I'm pretty sure is going to be losing and down a lot in a lot of their games.
Lovely.
Calvin Ridley is going to be a stud this year, and I am willing to say he's going to be the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy football this year. And I personally have been targeting him and getting him late in the 2nd round.
That's bold. I don't think you're crazy, but I wouldn't go so far as to say he's going to be number 1. I don't think he's going to be number 1. But
Devontae Adams surely probably will be, but I couldn't
Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, he's definitely going to be a guy that you should definitely target. He's got no downside. The only downside you could say is that now he's going to be facing, stiffer defense because you're not going to have like the top guy possibly on Julio Jones. He's going to draw the big cornerback matchup if that's the way teams are they're gonna go. If they match up their best on their best, he's gonna get the best. But I think he can definitely handle it. The volume is most certainly going to be there. I mean, he has no real competition for, at least in the wideout department. I do like Kyle Pitts, and I know we're going to talk about him soon. But yeah, I think that Calvin Ridley is a safe bet to be one of the top wide receivers. And if you draft him, I think that's smart.
All right, let's go to the duds. I know I have a big name in mind as a dud, but I'm going to let you take it away first. I hope you don't take him, but
okay. My dud is it's not going to be a guy who's high up. I'll tell you that right now. I'm just going to tell you that this guy is a guy that I've drafted a bunch of times, and he is a guy who, on paper, he looks great. And when he actually plays, he puts up stuff. I don't actually know if I'm going to be taking your guy. He puts up numbers when he actually plays. The problem is he never plays. And I know people are going to be looking at him because Miami doesn't have a ton of weapons.
Okay.
But Miami doesn't have a ton of weapons. So you might look at Will Fuller the 5th, and think that he's a good pick. Don't pick him. He can't stay on the field. He's already suspended to start the season. He's always injured. He was great when he was pairing up with the DeShaun Watson when he was in Houston for the times that he actually played, and he was incredibly efficient. It was like every throw to him was for 80 yards and a touchdown. But don't draft Will Fuller. He's not good, and he will get hurt. I guarantee you. That's my dud.
Okay, so it's not who I thought it was, but the description was similar until you said Miami. I'm going Kenny Golladay. with the Giants.
I almost went him.
Look, Odell Beckham had big seasons for the New York Giants, but that was with Eli Manning at quarterback. Daniel Jones is not Eli Manning, so good luck to new Giants hopeful Kenny Golladay. Daniel Jones threw 11 touchdown passes in 14 games last season, and that was not a lack of weapons at wide receiver. You had Sterling Shepard, you had Golden Tate, you had Evan Ingram at tight end, and you had some decent chances at some good production from the quarterback position. Clearly, they were trying to build around Daniel Jones' offseason. So sure, Kenny Galladay's presence helps, but he missed much of the 2020 year with hip and hamstring injuries and has already missed a significant part of time in training camp this year with another hamstring issue. He clutched and pulled up, and he's supposed to miss, I think, another 1 or 2 more weeks. Golladay had a big year with Matthew Stafford in 2019, but since then it has been nothing but disappointment. Daniel Jones is not Matthew Stafford. The question mark truly lies with Daniel Jones entering a make-or-break third year. Golladay has a path to solid volume, figures to be busy if they can get to the goal line, but the question remains, can Danny Dimes really get the ball to him? And I don't think he can.
Yeah, I almost went with him. I was this close again to picking the same stud as you. So yeah, I'm skeptical. You know, Daniel Jones is Daniel Jones. The Giants offensive line is the Giants offensive line. You don't know how Saquon's going to be, or if he's even going to be anything at all, especially early in the season. And so that's going to put a lot of pressure on Daniel Jones. And I just don't see it. I just don't see that offense being anything close to explosive. They were terrible last year, and I don't think they're going to get much better.
No, Giants stink.
If they have Saquon, they're going to get better, but only because of Saquon.
You ask me who the worst team in the NFC East is going to be this year, and that is my pick, the New York Football Giants. Let's go to breakout wide receivers, and you could go a lot of different ways with the wide receivers. There's a lot of intriguing names out there, but I'll let you go first.
Okay, so I'm going to go with a guy who is reuniting with a past quarterback, and I think people are underestimating him, and I think that he's going to end up being one of the favorite targets for this said quarterback in a new system, in a new place, and I'm going to go with Robbie Anderson on Carolina, and I think he's teaming up with Sam Darnold again. And I think you have DJ Moore there, obviously, and you have Christian McCaffrey. But the guy over the top, that's going to be Robbie Anderson. The speed guy, that's Robbie Anderson. So those big, long breakout throws that go for long touchdowns, if they happen, which I hope that they will. I hope, for his sake alone, I hope Sam Darnold can kind of rekindle like any hope that he had of being a good quarterback. Because, the Jets just suck the life out of all good quarterbacks that's possible. I don't know if he's actually going to be good or if he's good. I just think that the Jets just like make anyone who is remotely good look bad. So I still believe in Sam Darnold and that he can be at least a serviceable quarterback. I don't think he's terrible. And I think that Robbie Anderson being one of his targets when he was on the Jets, I think he's going to flourish in Carolina. And I think that he's going to be serviceable. Maybe not. Obviously, I don't think he's going to get wide receiver 1 numbers, but solid, maybe wide receiver 2, and you can get him at flex. And I think you can feel comfortable putting him at your flex. Going with Robbie Anderson.
I was very close to picking Robbie Anderson, but I am going to go. I am wearing it now. I am wearing it now. If you see on YouTube, my brand new Devontae Smith Eagles jersey. Guys, the fact that he is going and you can get him 8 through 10. I've seen him drop down to the 10th round even. This is a guy, 40th ranked wide receiver out there. The Eagles traded up to get this guy. 10th overall in the draft. Heisman Trophy winner, had a dominant 2020 campaign en route to that Heisman. The knock on him has always been the size. We get that. But his skills, man, his versatility, his speed, his quickness, his separation ability, his route running, his hands, 6 drops on 298 targets over the past 3 years in college. He is going to be wide receiver 1 out of the gate for the Philadelphia Eagles paired with Jalen Reagor. While it's yet to be seen if Jalen Hurts is going to be a true QB1, just like they were former teammates in your breakout in Robbie Anderson and Sam Darnold in the Jets, Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith were former teammates at Alabama. They had a clear chemistry. Everything that I've seen out of Eagles camp, they have had a phenomenal chemistry already this summer. This is a guy, Taylor, that is going to be involved in many ways. If you look at what Nick Sirianni does offensively, as you know, coming from the Colts, they do a lot of gadget wide receiver plays, a lot of screen plays. They're going to use him out of the backfield. They can use him over the top. He's going to hit those deep plays. There's just too much to not pass. I could not pass up on Devontae Smith. If he is there in the mid-late rounds and you can get him as your like wide receiver 4, I guarantee you by midway half of the year, he's probably one of your top 2 wide receivers on your roster. This kid is that good. He's going to be involved that much. And it really doesn't matter what Jalen Hurts does because they are going to get him the football.
Yeah, and looking at these rankings now, just going over it, I mean, the injury that he has sustained is a little bit of a concern. It was MCL sprain. Is that what that's what it was?
He has a sprained knee. He might be slow out of the gate when it comes to the regular season, simply because he's not going to play much in the preseason, if at all. But they're going to make sure he's ready for the start of the regular season. And he has been working on the jugs. He's been working. He's been at practice every day. He's been doing jogs. He's been doing sprints. He's doing everything he can with what they're allowing him to do. So I'm not, and all the reports that I've heard from Ian Rappaport, Adam Schefter, it's nothing to be concerned about, but they're being cautious for good reason.
Yeah. Okay. So that injury aside, this guy could be an absolute stud, especially because he's walking into number 1 status basically on the Eagles. So no matter what you think of Jalen Hurts, what we say earlier, the most important thing when it comes to fantasy is the targets, is the touches. If he's getting targets, he's going to get touches. He's going to put up points no matter how good the Eagles are or aren't. And so if he stays healthy, especially if he's the main guy who's getting targets, then there's value there just in that fact. And looking at these rankings, you know how I said my dud, Will Fuller? He's ranked lower than Will Fuller.
Yeah, there you go.
Don't take Will Fuller, take Devontae Smith, because there's all the upside in the world for Devontae Smith and all the downside in the world for Will Fuller. So if you're sitting there and you're in the 8th, 9th round or wherever, and you see Will Fuller, Jerry Jeudy, and Devontae Smith, don't take Will Fuller, take Devontae Smith. And especially if he's that low and you're drafting and he's your wide receiver 4, like you said, that's value and a half, because his ceiling is a wide receiver 1 or 2. So come next year, he might be in the top 10 to 15 for wide receiver ranking.
If you're in a keeper league and you're looking for somebody and you're looking for another guy to possibly have in the mix as one of your keepers moving forward, and you're looking for not having to give up a first or second round to have that your keeper be that pick in the next coming drafts, you could potentially be getting a wide receiver 1 for 7th, 8th round value moving forward if that's how your keeper goes to keep Devontae Smith. So definitely a name to keep an eye on. Last position, Taylor.
Do you want to just go right into breakout stud for the tight ends? Because top 10,
look, I'll list off the rankings. Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, George Kittle, Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts, TJ Hawkinson, Dallas Goedert, Logan Thomas, Noah Fant, and Robert Tonyan. Run out your top 10 at the tight end position. You have a bunch of interesting names after that. We all know how slim pickings a tight end position is. So, yeah, Taylor, right off the rip, let's just go right back into stud, dud, and breakout for the tight end position. We know what the top studs are going to be. Travis Kelce, we know Kelce, Waller, Kittle, Andrews is going to be. Who is going to be your stud outside of those guys? Because we're not counting those guys because that would be too easy. Who's your stud outside of that?
Man, it's just I can't not just go Kyle Pitts.
Right.
The dude looks ridiculous. He is a freak athlete. Everything out of Atlanta is saying that. I mean, he is as build. He is that good. And
he is Calvin Johnson built. People, he's not going to be
exactly.
The Falcons are going to use him in the Calvin Ridley role. He's not going to line up at tight end. They drafted him. He could play tight end, but he is going to be used as a wide receiver. Hayden Hurst is going to be more used as their tight end more than Kyle Pitts. This is a guy that is just a freakish athlete who's going to dominate right off the rip.
I can see him getting a ton of red zone targets. And yeah, I just think he's basically a wide receiver disguised as a tight end. And I think that's how they're going to use him, especially with Julio Jones gone. It's going to be Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts as the leaders in that wide receiver core. I truly believe that. And I think that he's going to have a monster season. I know we don't often see tight ends have seasons like this. I know TJ Hawkinson is a guy who he in this ranking that I'm looking at right here, he is ranked above Kyle Pitts. And TJ Hawkinson was a guy that they thought was going to be great right off the rip as soon as he came out of college and into the pros. And he had a pretty bad first couple seasons. Granted, he's in Detroit, but I think Kyle Pitts is going to be the anomaly. I think Kyle Pitts is almost a generational type tight end, if such a thing exists. I think Kyle Pitts is going to be an absolute stud, and I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes second overall, even first maybe. But I'm going to give that to Travis Kelce.
So there is concern, right, with drafting a 20-year-old rookie tight end early enough in the pick. He's average. He's reasonable if he's around in like the 5th or 6th round, but I'm not so sure I'm going to be as bold to take him in the 4th or the 3rd with some of these elite tight ends, because that's where Kelce or Waller, somebody's going to take him in that range. I'm not sure I'm willing to do that with Pitts because there is risk there, but it could pay off for a lot of people if it does happen. My stud is going to be TJ Hawkinson. Out of Detroit. And the reason I like TJ, first off, because of the growth he had in year 2, the Lions overhauled their offensive personnel, and not in a good way. You brought in Jared Goff at quarterback, who's serviceable, but not Matthew Stafford. And there's about no wide receivers of honorable mention that I could throw out there for you to be even considering to be fantasy relevant. Hawkinson is going to be outside handing the ball off to DeAndre Swift. Hawkinson is the target for Jared Goff, and he's on the upswing at age 24. And even in a rebuilding offense, he's viewed as a solid fantasy tight end one that I think can put up top 5 numbers, and you can get him value wise pretty late. His ADP right now, you're looking at 10th, 11th round for a guy like TJ Hawkinson, and a lot of people are scared because of the Lions offense. Targets is everything. The Lions are going to be down. Goff needs somebody to throw the football to. Guess what? TJ Hawkinson is going to be that guy.
Yeah, and I wouldn't argue with that at all. I'm just high on Kyle Pitts because I think he's crazy.
I trust me, I do not disagree with you. I think he's a freak athlete, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him go in the first 3 rounds in a lot of drafts this year, just because.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I don't think that I'm going to be one of those people. I don't really know. I haven't done a mock draft yet. I'm kind of waiting on it because I like to see, with injuries and stuff, where things lie a little closer to when I'm actually drafting, because everything changes. I mean, it's always changing. But if I were to get Kyle Pitts, I would take him higher. Like, say we're in the 3rd round and I'm picking at the back end of the 3rd round if I'm feeling frisky and I feel good about the first 2 picks and there's not a ton of value at where I'm at. I might reach for him a bit just because I think that he's the possibility to be that good, especially at the tight end position, which is, after the top 10 to 15 guys, you're looking at crap. It's not like wide receiver where the 20th guy down the list can still get you good games here and there. The tight end list, once you get down after the top guys, it's slim pickings, and you're lucky if they put up 10 points.
Let's go to the duds, and there's a couple interesting names, and this is where it gets interesting outside of the top 10 that could absolutely fall on their face. I'm going to start off with this one because I'm afraid you're going to take him, and you've taken some of my guys. It's Robert Tonyan from the Packers. Those choosing Robert Tonyan in the first 10 rounds are going to be pretty disappointed if they expect another 11 touchdowns like they got last year. Tonyan had 59 targets last season, which is actually 24th at the position. He was not involved heavily outside of the red zone. So even with Rodgers back at quarterback, that's an unsustainable rate to rank 24th in targets at the position, but have double-digit touchdowns, especially with Rodgers' involvement with Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon. You still have a healthy Devontae Parker. I'm not seeing – Tonyan will put up numbers, but you can get value later on that can put up similar, if not better numbers with a heavier target share than Robert Tonyan would when you're looking at the first 10 rounds. I'm calling Tonyan a stud or a dud. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
dud.
I had Tonyan. I had Tonyan last year, and the touchdowns were really nice. Hard to predict when he would actually get them, though, which is another issue. He's not a guy. He wasn't a guy where you could start him every week, or at least comfortably, because of the fact that if he didn't get a touchdown, he wasn't that involved. You're right, and that's exactly what it is. Is he was the red zone guy. Whether he will be the red zone guy again, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't call you crazy if you pick him just because. I mean,
well, yeah. I mean, the stats are there. Sure.
Yeah, he could definitely continue to be the red zone target for Aaron Rodgers, and we know that Aaron Rodgers is going to put up points. He's going to throw touchdowns, and if they have to go to someone in the red zone, they might as well go to Robert Tonyan. But I can definitely see him being a dud, at least regressing from 11. You know, that's a little absurd. But let's go on to mine. Mine's a guy that I'm just going to put it out there because I've been burnt before, and I think that people need to just stop. Just stop with this guy. He's not a top tight end. Stop drafting him like he's a top tight end. Stop thinking that he's going to save your season, and that's Evan Ingram.
Yep.
Do not draft Evan Ingram. He is not good, and he's not good in the offense. Daniel Jones is not like throwing to the tight end, I guess. I don't know, but just the New York Giants don't love using that tight end position, and Evan Ingram every year he looks like he's going to be that guy. He looks like he could break into that top 10 tight end range, but just don't do it. Just
with a Giants offense that brought in Kenny Galladay, drafted Kadarius Toney, he's now sharing the tight end room with Kyle Rudolph. I'm not saying Kyle Rudolph is going to be a fantasy relevant tight end or even be the tight end one, but it's enough to take away from already an offense that you have Daniel Jones, who threw 11 touchdowns last year. Yeah, no, I'm over it. I had Evan Ingram last season, and as a backup, but I had him, and it just he was the number 5 scoring fantasy tight end as a rookie in 2017. And ever since then, it has gone straight downhill. The potential is there, but I think he needs to change the scenery before he becomes fantasy relevant again.
Yep. Moving on to breakout.
Right. We're going on to breakout. And since I took away a dud from you, maybe, I don't know if I did or not, but I'll let you rip off the breakout since I took dud.
All right. So the breakout guy for me is a guy who has the starting position at tight end for a team, and he is in a offense that has a new quarterback, and honestly we're not gonna see really how this quarterback runs this offense, because it's going to be completely different and new. And I'm just going to go ahead and say my guy is Adam Troutman from the New Orleans Saints. And I think that having presumably Jameis Winston under center, Jameis Winston, if nothing else, he may throw a lot of picks, but he usually also throws a lot of touchdowns. And that Saints offense is going to be somewhat explosive. You still have Alvin Kamara in the backfield. And when they get into the red zone, I'm going to think that they're going to throw a lot of Adam Troutman picks or looks in the red zone.
Well, yeah, to your point. I mean, we just talked about it with our reasoning with Kamara. I mean, you don't have Michael Thomas for at least the first half of the year. You lost Emmanuel Sanders. You don't have Jimmy Graham anymore. You have Traquan Smith, for crying out loud, battling out for the wide. Really, right now, looking as a clear wide receiver one, you're looking for another second, target, especially in the red zone. It can't be Kamara and Kamara alone. Yeah, I mean, look, is there a risk involved? Absolutely. But you're going to find him as a late round sleeper that could end up by mid-year being your tight end one. Absolutely. I definitely, now that you mention him, and he was on my radar, I just honestly, I had someone else in mind, so I wasn't going to use him. I love that. I love the thought behind Adam Troutman. Absolutely. I'm going to go with Irv Smith Jr. with the Vikings. Right. Kyle Rudolph is gone. Irv Smith Jr. has been loved for quite some time now, and he hasn't really been able to put it together. He's entering his third NFL year, but he's finally positioned, in my opinion, for a breakout following the offseason departure, like I said, of Kyle Rudolph. He has thus far been limited to 91 targets in 29 regular season games and has yet to deliver a top 20 fantasy season so far. But when Rudolph was sidelined the final 4 weeks of 2020, you started to see that potential and what everybody thought he could be for Minnesota, which was posting a strong 15-183 with 3 touchdowns receiving line. And that was the overall tight end 4 in fantasy over that span. Though he was out targeted by Tyler Conklin at that time, I think that was at the point where the Vikings were at as a team. And aside of the boost and opportunity, this offense is high scoring. Kirk Cousins still flings the football around. You have Jefferson and Thielen, but you're looking for that third target. He's going to be a red zone target for you. But the biggest reason for optimism might be his age. I mean, it seems like he's been in the league for quite some time now, but he just turned 23 this month, and he's a strong tight end 2 target with room for more that could easily sneak into a top 10 position that, quite frankly, has been begging for some depth for years now. I think Irv Smith is going to be a big part of a top 10 tight end for years to come.
Yeah, I could definitely see it, especially, I mean, Kyle Rudolph has always been a decent chunk of that offense. And so, Minnesota likes to use the tight end, especially in situations where they're like, red zone looks if they can't punch it in with Dalvin Cook. So yeah, I would be happy if I got him late. Obviously, I'm not reaching for him, but if he happens to be the guy on the back end, he could definitely be serviceable for you at the tight end spot.
All right, Taylor. That was our 2021 fantasy football preview. Hopefully we set you guys up for some success, breaking down all the important positions. We didn't get into kicker and defense because that should be your 15th and 16th round picks, and we'll leave it at that. But we really broke down each position for you in a way we hope sets you up for some success. We could sit here till we're blue in the face until Christmas talking about fantasy football, but we wanted to bring you the key points, and hopefully we helped some people out there today. We saved a fantasy life today, Taylor.
Hopefully. Anyone who's trying to draft Evan Ingram, don't do it. Come on now. Watch our talking now. He's going to be like one of the top tight ends in the league. I'd be laugh so hard if all the duds we said actually turned out to be studs.
Yeah, we'll have to relook at this episode at the end of the season and how bad we looked. But no, thank you.
We were wrong. But
thank you for everyone who tuned into this episode. I do want to thank another one of our sponsors. That would be Saving Face Barbershop up in Saratoga Springs. Yeah, we're both. That's why I'm wearing the hat today. I didn't even put gel in it. It's getting to that point. Go see our boy Jeremiah up off exit 13N on the Northway. Track season, summertime. You got to look good walking into those fantasy football drafts coming up. Get that fresh cut and get that fresh buzz. You could get a close face shave as well. They have plenty of times. You just go online, Google Saving Face Barbershop. Their website goes in. You pick the Saratoga location, and you can book your appointment right online. He has reasonable prices, and they are not going to be happy until you're satisfied with how you're looking. And of course, you want to look good. So go in there. You're not going to regret the experience you get at Saving Face Barbershop up in Saratoga Springs. I'd like to thank Gaz and Godzilla Media for presenting this episode as well. And hopefully we helped you guys with your fantasy football selections down the line. For Taylor Lattimore, I am Bryce Linsky. This was the Fantasy Football 2021 special edition of Sports with a Z and a T. We will catch you next week.
See ya.